The cold night air clung to the cobblestone streets of a quiet European town, carrying the faint smell of smoke from distant hearths and the damp, earthy scent of the forest beyond. Shadows stretched long beneath flickering torchlight. In the hidden corners of alleys and abandoned buildings, figures moved with deliberate caution. Cloaked in secrecy, they carried parcels of parchment, vials of strange liquids, and implements whose purpose was whispered only in hushed tones. This was a world invisible to ordinary eyes, a world where knowledge, ambition, and obsession intertwined in a clandestine struggle few dared to speak of aloud. It was here, in these hidden spaces, that men and women began to pursue a promise older than memory, the promise of immortality. For centuries, stories had traveled quietly through whispers and coded manuscripts. Tales of men who sought to conquer death itself, who delved into mysteries of the natural world and the divine, who crossed the boundaries of morality in the desperate hope of prolonging their lives. Some were brilliant scholars, devoted to uncovering hidden laws of nature. Others were driven by fear, the gnawing certainty that life was fleeting and death inevitable. The alchemists, as they came to be known, walked a precarious path between legend and reality, their lives an intricate dance of secrecy, experimentation, and peril. Their laboratories, hidden beneath castles or tucked away in secluded villages, were filled with strange apparatuses, glass retorts that hissed with unseen reactions, crucibles glowing with unnatural fire, and powders that seemed to shimmer with an almost otherworldly vitality. But immortality was not merely a scientific endeavor. It was a story of human ambition writ large, a narrative fueled by the most intense emotions. Greed, envy, faith, and devotion collided in a world that was itself on the edge of chaos. Europe, at the time, was a continent racked by wars, plagues, and political upheaval. The memory of death was fresh in every mind. The air seemed thick with it, and so the promise of escaping mortality was almost irresistible. Kingdoms and dukedoms were ruled by men who feared their own mortality as much as the threat of rivals. And some of these rulers were willing to fund the alchemists' hidden laboratories to provide gold, rare minerals, and political protection in exchange for knowledge that could elevate them above all men. The pursuit of immortality was far from a solitary endeavor. Secret networks stretched across Europe, linking laboratories in Prague, Florence, Paris, and London. Letters written in cryptic code traveled in the hands of trusted messengers, carrying formulas, observations, and warnings. Apprentices trained under watchful masters, absorbing knowledge that was often lethal, not only in its application, but in its secrecy. Mistakes could be fatal. Accidents, whether from volatile chemicals or human error, were common, and rumors of mysterious deaths circulated swiftly through the hidden corridors of power. Some alchemists vanished without explanation, leaving behind only charred notes and half-finished experiments. Theories arose that they had been eliminated by rivals, or perhaps by those who understood that the knowledge they possessed was too dangerous to survive them. Yet, despite the danger, the lure of the unknown drew more seekers into the shadows. They were not merely scientists or dreamers. They were men and women willing to risk everything for the chance to escape the most certain of fates. Among them were figures whose names are now lost to history, known only through cryptic entries in diaries or scattered references in the margins of manuscripts. These people often worked in silence, their ambition unrecorded in the official annals of kings or the pages of churches. They whispered to each other in secluded chambers, in the quiet hours before dawn, about secrets that could, if unlocked, defy nature itself. Even the air itself seemed to vibrate with possibility. In these hidden laboratories, mixtures bubbled with an uncanny luminescence. Powders were ground in delicate rituals, and elixirs shimmered with the promise of life eternal. To the untrained eye, it was mere chemistry, but to those who understood the subtle arts, every reaction carried profound significance. The alchemists believed they could bridge the mortal and the divine, that through fire, water, air, and earth they could transmute not just metals, but the essence of life itself. Yet in this pursuit, obsession often overshadowed wisdom. Friendships shattered under suspicion, mentors betrayed by apprentices, and some patrons themselves fell victim to the very secrets they sought to possess. And so, under the cover of night, the shadow of immortality stretched across Europe like a silent, insistent tide. Each hidden experiment, each coded manuscript, each whispered warning built a web that connected ambition and danger, desire and despair. The people engaged in this secret war were not heroes in the conventional sense. They were flawed, human, and endlessly fascinating. They were driven by the ultimate question: could death be cheated? Could life be stretched beyond its natural bounds? And what would be the cost if that ambition succeeded? By the end of that night, as the torches dimmed and the streets returned to their quiet emptiness, a single thought lingered in the minds of those who dared to chase the impossible. The pursuit of immortality was a war fought not with armies, but with intellect, courage, and audacity. And as history would quietly record, some would pay with their lives, some would vanish into obscurity, and a few might glimpse truths that would forever remain just beyond the reach of ordinary men. The shadow of immortality had already begun to shape the destiny of Europe, and the stage was set for a struggle that would span generations, leaving behind mysteries that would challenge understanding for centuries to come. Legend spoke of a substance so powerful it could turn base metals into gold, heal the sick, and grant life beyond death. This was the philosopher's stone, a myth whispered in the halls of scholars and hidden in the margins of dusty manuscripts. To ordinary people, it was fantasy. To the alchemists who chased it, it was destiny. They believed that the key to unlocking this eternal secret lay not only in matter, but in mastery of the self, in understanding the hidden rhythms of nature, and in courage to transgress boundaries others dared not cross. It was a dream that shimmered tantalizingly on the horizon, a promise that the impossible could be wrested from the ordinary world. In this pursuit, ambition and obsession merged seamlessly. Some alchemists saw themselves as the heirs of divine knowledge, chosen to glimpse truths the rest of humanity could not comprehend. Others were driven by fear, their nights haunted by visions of death and decay, their days consumed by the relentless need to cheat mortality. The philosopher's stone was more than an object. It was a symbol of ultimate power, a vessel of hope and terror intertwined. To hold it was to wield authority over life and death, to step beyond the fragile limitations of flesh and blood. And so, for centuries, Europe became a silent battlefield of intellect and daring, where the greatest minds were drawn into a quest both dazzling and deadly. But the dream of immortality was not without cost. Alchemists risked not only their fortunes, but their very lives in pursuit of this elusive prize. Their laboratories were filled with smoke, strange odors, and a ceaseless hiss of reactions they barely controlled. Many met early deaths from accidental poisonings, explosions, or infections from the rare ingredients they handled. Some vanished entirely, leaving behind notes that hinted at discoveries never fully realized, formulas half complete, and warnings that seemed almost prophetic. Rumors spread that certain masters had achieved partial success, glimpsing secrets no ordinary human was meant to see. Yet those who dared speak too openly of such revelations often disappeared, swallowed by the very world they sought to command. The philosopher's dream was also intensely personal. Every seeker approached it in their own way, shaped by experience, temperament, and fear. For some, it was the ultimate intellectual challenge, to solve nature's greatest riddle, to uncover the mechanisms that governed life and death. For others, it was a desperate plea, a final attempt to wrest time from the hands of fate. Love, rivalry, ambition, and betrayal all intertwined in these pursuits. Families could be torn apart by suspicion. Apprentices might spy on masters, and patrons could betray their alchemists to protect secrets too dangerous to share. In this web of secrecy, few could discern loyalty from treachery, and the line between genius and madness blurred endlessly. Despite the danger and mystery, the dream spread across Europe. Alchemical texts traveled secretly between cities, encoded with symbols, diagrams, and cryptic references. A scholar in Florence might read a manuscript from Prague, carefully translating its hidden meaning while guarding against spies who sought the same knowledge. Conversations in taverns, churchyards, and marketplaces carried hints of forbidden wisdom, sometimes as parables, sometimes as veiled threats. In this world, knowledge itself was a weapon, and every revelation could bring both elevation and ruin. The alchemists understood that even the smallest mistake might cost years of work or life itself. Interestingly, the pursuit of the philosopher's stone was never purely material. It was suffused with philosophy, mysticism, and spirituality. Alchemists believed that by understanding the transformation of metals, they were also glimpsing the transformation of the soul. The search for immortality was inseparable from the search for enlightenment, and many spent decades in silent meditation, combining study with ritual, devotion, and meticulous experimentation. Some claimed that the stone could only be discovered by those who had purified themselves morally, mentally, and spiritually, creating a mystique that elevated the quest from scientific pursuit to sacred pilgrimage. Yet, as the dream spread, danger multiplied. Secret societies, jealous rivals, and powerful patrons competed for fragments of knowledge. Wars of secrecy broke out in whispered exchanges. Manuscripts were stolen, apprentices coerced into betrayal, and laboratories destroyed in the dead of night. The quest was no longer a solitary endeavor. It had become a covert struggle for control over the most powerful secret in Europe. And as centuries passed, the dream persisted, its allure undiminished. Generations of alchemists continued to chase it, guided by ancient texts, cryptic formulas, and the persistent hope that they might finally uncover the ultimate truth. This pursuit, however, was never guaranteed to succeed. The more the alchemists uncovered, the more elusive the stone seemed. Some began to suspect that immortality was not a material prize at all, but a philosophical or spiritual state forever beyond mortal grasp. Others grew obsessed, spending decades in darkness, experimenting with dangerous substances, and risking the lives of those around them. And still, the legend endured, whispered in clandestine gatherings, encoded in obscure manuscripts, and passed down through secret networks that span the continent. By the end of this chapter of the story, the audience is left with a profound sense of awe and unease. The philosopher's dream was both a beacon and a curse, promising ultimate power while demanding unparalleled courage, cunning, and sacrifice. Its pursuit would shape destinies, ignite rivalries, and leave a trail of mystery and tragedy in its wake. And as the camera would linger over the flickering lights of a hidden European laboratory, the viewer is compelled to ask, who truly stood closest to discovering the stone, and what price did they, or would they, pay to glimpse immortality itself? The Europe of the 16th century was a continent perpetually on the edge of chaos. Cities burned with the smoke of conflict, armies marched through kingdoms with banners raised high, and the cries of the dying echoed in streets that had once known peace. Political intrigue ran like a hidden river beneath every throne, twisting loyalties and fueling betrayals. Peasants huddled in fear of taxes, famine, and disease, while nobles maneuvered in courts rife with deception. It was a time when life was fragile, and the shadow of death loomed everywhere, a constant, unyielding companion. And in the midst of this turmoil, the alchemists pursued their dream, the philosopher's stone, with an intensity amplified by the fragility of the world around them. The threats of war and disease were not abstract. They were visceral, visible, and terrifying. Plague swept across towns and cities, claiming thousands in weeks, leaving streets lined with the dead. Armies brought not only the sword, but starvation and plague, decimating populations and leaving entire regions in ruin. For scholars and alchemists alike, the impermanence of life was never theoretical. It was immediate, undeniable. This fear of mortality, of powerlessness, drove some men and women to take extreme risks, to gamble with dangerous chemicals, to trespass the boundaries of morality and faith, all in the hope of discovering a way to escape the ultimate certainty. Amid this turmoil, religion intertwined with politics in complex, often deadly ways. The Reformation had begun to fracture Europe, challenging long-standing traditions and igniting fervent debates that sometimes ended in violence. Monarchs and princes were compelled to choose sides, their decisions carrying the weight of both divine judgment and mortal consequence. In such a world, the allure of hidden knowledge, of secret powers capable of defying death or transforming matter, became irresistible. Alchemists were drawn into these power struggles, often as secret advisors, sometimes as pawns in games far larger than themselves. They worked under the watchful eyes of patrons who wielded influence across borders, aware that a single misstep could lead to execution or exile. But danger was not confined to politics and plague. Nature itself seemed complicit in the sense of urgency that enveloped the continent. Winters were harsh, crops failed, and rivers froze in ways that threatened trade and survival. Europe was a landscape that punished complacency, demanding vigilance, creativity, and courage. The alchemists, in this unforgiving environment, often sought refuge in secluded monasteries, hidden laboratories, or deep within forests. They became masters of secrecy, learning to move undetected, to communicate in code, and to protect knowledge that could alter the balance of power or end their lives. It was also a time when science, superstition, and mysticism collided. The boundaries between alchemy and chemistry, between magic and medicine, were porous, shifting with the whims of discovery and imagination. Alchemists observed nature with obsessive precision, yet interpreted results through the lens of mythology and philosophy. Metals could symbolize the human soul. Processes of transformation reflected spiritual journeys. Every experiment carried not just a potential material reward, but profound symbolic meaning. And in a Europe plagued by uncertainty, these meanings resonated deeply with those desperate for control over their destinies. Yet, the pursuit of immortality in this setting was rarely purely intellectual. Fear and ambition intertwined, sometimes destructively. Some alchemists became embroiled in deadly rivalries, competing for the favor of wealthy patrons or for fragments of knowledge that might lead to the stone. Laboratories were sabotaged, manuscripts stolen, apprentices lured away, and mysterious deaths whispered through corridors like curses. The pursuit of immortality became a shadow war in its own right, a battle waged not with armies, but with secrecy, cunning, and often lethal precision. Despite the danger, the dream endured. The chaos of Europe created both necessity and opportunity. Kings and nobles, confronted with mortality and the fragility of their reigns, poured gold into the hands of those who promised to uncover nature's hidden truths. Some patrons believed in the philosopher's stone's literal power. Others valued the prestige, the sense of control it promised, or the chance to wield influence over the hidden world of secret societies. In return, alchemists gained protection, rare ingredients, and access to networks that stretched across borders and decades. But the cost was never small. The alchemist's loyalty, life, and sometimes morality were constantly at risk. The irony of this era lay in the contrast between destruction and creation. As Europe burned with the fires of war and plague, alchemists quietly distilled, mixed, and experimented in hidden laboratories, pursuing a dream that defied death itself. The tension between the fragility of human life and the audacity of their ambition created a story of profound drama, a story of courage, obsession, and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. And yet, for all their genius and daring, the dream remained elusive. Each failure left scars, each success was incomplete, and the ultimate prize seemed to recede with every step closer. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a stark sense of context. The pursuit of immortality did not occur in a vacuum. It unfolded against a backdrop of turmoil, fear, and relentless mortality, making every discovery, every secret, and every risk all the more charged with significance. Europe in Flames had forged a generation of alchemists whose ambitions would shape destinies, test loyalties, and leave a trail of mystery that still captivates centuries later. And as the camera pans across a map marked with cities, battlefields, and hidden laboratories, the viewer cannot help but wonder, in a world defined by fragility, who would dare to defy the ultimate inevitability of death? And at what cost? Beneath the surface of Europe's turmoil, there existed a world most would never glimpse. A network of hidden orders and secret societies devoted to the pursuit of knowledge, power, and, above all, immortality. These were not mere clubs or scholarly circles. They were highly structured, clandestine organizations, often operating under layers of secrecy so intricate that even members could not be entirely sure of one another. Symbols etched in stone, coded letters, and encrypted manuscripts were the language of this shadowed world. Meetings were conducted at night, in candlelit chambers deep beneath monasteries or in secluded castles, where the outside world dared not intrude. And in these hidden spaces, the pursuit of eternal life became both a spiritual and political endeavor, intertwined with ambition, danger, and obsession. The alchemists of these orders were both scholars and spies, philosophers and tacticians. Knowledge, in this world, was power in its purest form, and information was as valuable as gold. Each order maintained careful records of discoveries, experiments, and allegiances, but these records were often cryptic, layered with meaning only understood by those trained in their secrets. Initiates learned to read symbols like maps, to interpret diagrams like codes, and to follow rituals whose origins stretched back centuries. Membership was not granted lightly. It required devotion, intellect, and, in many cases, the willingness to risk life and reputation. Betrayal was punished swiftly and without mercy, often leaving lessons written in blood and secrecy. But these orders were not monolithic. Rivalries festered beneath their formal hierarchy. Some were dedicated purely to experimentation, seeking the philosopher's stone or the elixir of life with relentless devotion. Others were deeply entangled with the courts of kings and dukes, acting as secret advisors, financiers, or manipulators of political power. Conflicts arose when allegiances shifted, when an apprentice discovered a method his master had kept hidden, or when a patron's ambitions threatened to unravel carefully guarded networks. This internal tension ensured that the pursuit of immortality was never purely intellectual. It was a game of wit, strategy, and often lethal competition. The secrecy of these orders also extended to their philosophy. Many alchemists believed that immortality could not be granted merely through the manipulation of matter. It required mastery over the self, over the soul, and over the unseen forces that govern existence. Rituals of initiation were both symbolic and practical. They tested the courage, wisdom, and integrity of new members, sometimes through dangerous experiments or moral challenges. Stories circulated of initiates who emerged enlightened, their understanding of the universe profoundly transformed. Others did not survive the trials, their fates quietly erased from the order's records. The distinction between success and failure was razor thin, and the line between genius and madness was often crossed with terrifying ease. Even the most powerful kings and dukes could not penetrate these hidden networks easily. Orders were careful to maintain distance from political authority, and when they did interact with patrons, it was always with calculated caution. Letters were encrypted, meetings were arranged under false pretenses, and intermediaries acted as buffers between the scholar and the sovereign. Some rulers believed they were commissioning simple experiments in metallurgy or medicine, unaware that the alchemists were pursuing life itself, along with knowledge that could grant influence far beyond the court's reach. For those who did know, the rewards were intoxicating. Whispers of elixirs, gold that never ran out, and the faint possibility of defying death itself. Yet every interaction carried risk. A patron could turn on a master, an apprentice could betray secrets, and entire orders could collapse under pressure from enemies, both human and supernatural in their reputation. The orders also maintained a system of mentorship and apprenticeship that was both rigorous and perilous. A young alchemist might spend decades under a master's guidance, learning the subtleties of chemical reactions, the meaning of symbols, and the secrets of hidden laboratories. But trust was fragile. Rival orders sometimes infiltrated these relationships, planting spies who would relay information to competing factions or to patrons seeking advantage. The result was a landscape of constant vigilance, where loyalty was tested daily, and a single misstep could lead to exposure, disgrace, or death. Even within a single order, factions emerged, each vying for control of experiments, manuscripts, or the favor of influential patrons. The alchemist's path was never solitary. It was a web of intrigue, allegiance, and subtle conflict. Perhaps most remarkable was the resilience of these orders. Despite political upheaval, religious persecution, and the inherent dangers of their work, they survived, often adapting to the changing world while maintaining core secrets. They communicated across borders, across decades, and sometimes across generations. Manuscripts would be smuggled from Florence to Prague to London, encoded in multiple layers of cipher, hidden within mundane texts, or concealed in objects that seemed ordinary. Knowledge itself became a treasure, more carefully guarded than gold or jewels. And yet, for all the secrecy, the orders shared a common goal: the pursuit of immortality and the belief that the human mind could unlock mysteries far beyond conventional understanding. The human element in these secret societies cannot be overstated. These were people driven by obsession, devotion, fear, and desire. Friendships were forged and broken, alliances created and betrayed, and lives expended in the relentless chase for what seemed perpetually just beyond reach. Love, ambition, and envy all played roles, intertwining personal stakes with the grand pursuit of eternal life. Some alchemists became legends, their names whispered with reverence or fear. Others were lost to obscurity, their work absorbed by the order or destroyed to prevent misuse. Every experiment, every encoded manuscript, every secret meeting carried the weight of human consequence, and every failure left its own shadow on history. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that the alchemists' hidden orders were far more than academic societies. They were clandestine networks operating in the shadows of Europe, shaping knowledge, ambition, and sometimes destiny itself. They were the engines of a silent war, where the prize was not land or gold, but life eternal. And as the audience imagines torchlit chambers filled with murmuring scholars, encrypted manuscripts, and the quiet hum of forbidden experiments, they are left with a chilling realization. Some of the most profound secrets of Europe's past were never meant to be discovered by ordinary eyes, and the shadow of immortality had already begun to weave its influence in ways the world would never fully understand. In the hidden corners of Europe, far from the prying eyes of monarchs, priests, and common folk, alchemists worked in silence, their lives defined by experiments that teetered between genius and madness. Their laboratories were places of wonder and terror, vials filled with glowing liquids, crucibles that hissed and spit in unpredictable bursts of fire, powders that shimmered with unearthly light, and symbols etched into stone walls whose meanings were known only to the initiated. Every object, every tool, and every ritual had a purpose, each carefully calibrated to unravel the secrets of nature and, ultimately, to breach the boundary between life and death. Alchemy in this era was far more than the manipulation of metals or the quest for gold. It was a philosophy, a spiritual journey, and, for some, a dangerous obsession. Alchemists believed that the transformation of matter mirrored the transformation of the soul, that understanding the hidden workings of the universe could lead to mastery over mortality itself. Experiments were painstaking, often taking months or even years, as precise measurements, temperatures, and sequences could determine success or disaster. One miscalculation might destroy years of work, or worse, release toxic fumes that claimed the life of the experimenter. Death was always present in the laboratory, as constant and unpredictable as the flames in the crucible. The secrecy of alchemical work was paramount. Many alchemists feared persecution by the church, whose suspicion of forbidden knowledge could lead to imprisonment or execution. Others feared rival alchemists, eager to steal formulas, sabotage experiments, or claim credit for discoveries not their own. Laboratories were therefore hidden in basements, behind false walls, in abandoned castles, or deep within forests. Entry was tightly controlled, guarded by apprentices sworn to silence, and rituals designed to confuse and deter outsiders. Letters and manuscripts were encoded, and even trusted allies were sometimes tested for loyalty. In this world, knowledge was a currency more valuable than gold, and the wrong person discovering a secret could mean death. Yet for all the danger, alchemists were driven by an unrelenting curiosity. They studied minerals, plants, and metals with obsessive precision. They observed reactions with a careful eye, recorded every anomaly, and experimented with combinations both mundane and exotic. Some worked to perfect the legendary philosopher's stone. Others sought the elixir of life, a potion rumored to heal disease and grant longevity. Every experiment carried hope, but also the constant risk of catastrophe. Fires consumed laboratories, explosions shattered stone walls, and poisoning from volatile chemicals claimed countless lives. To outsiders, their work might have seemed mystical or absurd, but to the alchemists, it was the most serious pursuit imaginable, a quest to understand and control the very fabric of existence. Interestingly, alchemy was never purely scientific. Ritual and symbolism played a central role. Metals represented spiritual qualities, planets influenced reactions, and certain stages of the work required moral and spiritual readiness. Some alchemists believed that only those who had purified themselves, morally and mentally, could achieve success. Experiments were intertwined with meditation, prayer, and sometimes bizarre rituals designed to align the practitioner with unseen forces. Failure was not only practical, it was spiritual, a sign that the experimenter's mind or soul was not yet attuned to the mysteries being pursued. Alchemical work also carried a profound human cost. Friendships and alliances could crumble under the pressure of competition and secrecy. Apprentices might betray masters for recognition. Patrons might withdraw funding or turn enforcers against their own alchemists, and rival orders often sought to undermine progress through theft, sabotage, or murder. The path of the alchemist was lonely, hazardous, and morally ambiguous. Lives were often sacrificed in the pursuit of knowledge, and the line between brilliance and insanity was perilously thin. Some alchemists devoted decades to experiments that yielded nothing but frustration and despair, while others achieved fleeting success that vanished as mysteriously as it appeared. Yet, despite these dangers, alchemy persisted, and the shadowed laboratories became crucibles not only for chemical transformations, but for human ambition and obsession. Men and women worked tirelessly, driven by fear, hope, and the intoxicating lure of secrets that could change the course of their lives, and possibly the world. The thrill of discovery, the tension of secrecy, and the haunting possibility of immortality created a unique blend of awe and terror. Every mixture, every reaction, and every observation carried both promise and peril. The legacy of these hidden laboratories is subtle but enduring. Though many manuscripts were destroyed and many experiments failed, traces of their work persisted in encoded texts, cryptic symbols, and myths passed down through generations. Some knowledge seeped into mainstream science, disguised as chemistry or medicine, while other secrets remained fiercely guarded, lost to history, or deliberately erased. For centuries, the alchemist's influence was felt quietly, shaping thought, experimentation, and belief in ways the world barely recognized. By the end of this section, the audience comes to understand that alchemy in the shadows was more than mere experimentation. It was a theater of human ambition, a crucible of intellect and obsession, and a dangerous game with life itself as the stakes. The pursuit of immortality was relentless, brilliant, and terrifying, leaving behind a trail of innovation, mystery, and human drama that continues to captivate imaginations. And as the viewer envisions candlelit rooms, bubbling elixirs, and the tense silence of a master observing an experiment, they are compelled to ask, how far would a human go to transcend mortality, and what might they leave behind in the shadows of their ambition? Beyond the laboratories, beyond the coded manuscripts and secret rituals, another world shaped the pursuit of immortality, the world of patrons. Kings, dukes, and wealthy nobles wielded power not only through armies and alliances, but through influence over knowledge itself. They were the silent forces behind the alchemists, the ones who could fund experiments that would otherwise be impossible, provide rare ingredients, and shield dangerous pursuits from inquisitive eyes. Yet in doing so, they also played a high-stakes game of manipulation, ambition, and sometimes betrayal. For in a world where immortality was the prize, loyalty was fragile and danger always lurked. Patrons often approached alchemists with a mixture of curiosity, greed, and fear. To the ruler, the philosopher's stone or the elixir of life represented more than wealth. They symbolized power, dominance over rivals, and the defiance of death itself. Some rulers imagined themselves as immortal, their reigns stretching beyond natural limitations, their names carved into history unchallenged. Others were driven by desperation, haunted by illness, threats, or the awareness that mortality spared no one, regardless of status or strength. And so, they turned to alchemists, commissioning work that blurred the lines between science, magic, and ambition. But the relationship between patron and alchemist was delicate. Alchemists were masters of secrecy, bound by oaths and the knowledge that their discoveries could be fatal in the wrong hands. Patrons, by contrast, sought results, often pressuring their scholars to produce gold, elixirs, or miraculous cures, regardless of the risks involved. This tension could lead to collaboration, but it could just as easily ignite conflict. Some alchemists were coerced into dangerous experiments. Others were manipulated, their discoveries claimed as the property of a powerful ruler. In a single misstep, an apprentice might betray a master, a formula could be stolen, or a patron's favor might turn to lethal suspicion. Interestingly, patrons themselves were not always entirely aware of what they funded. Alchemists were adept at framing their work in terms that appealed to the ambitions of rulers. A formula for purification of metals could be presented as a recipe for gold. A medicinal experiment could hint at miraculous longevity. Letters were carefully worded, reports obscured in layers of symbolism, and demonstrations staged to impress without revealing the deeper truths of their craft. This allowed alchemists a degree of independence, but it also created a precarious balance. Too little transparency could anger a patron. Too much revelation could invite scrutiny, betrayal, or even death. The stakes were further complicated by rivalry between patrons. Across Europe, different courts competed for advantage in secretive ways, often using alchemists as instruments of strategy. Manuscripts might be stolen, apprentices bribed, or laboratories sabotaged to prevent one ruler from gaining knowledge that could shift power. The pursuit of immortality was never merely a private quest. It was a game of political chess played in shadows, where each move could have profound consequences. Alliances were fragile, and the ambitions of patrons often shaped the trajectory of alchemy itself, influencing which experiments were pursued, which secrets were safeguarded, and which were deliberately destroyed. In some cases, patrons were as obsessed as the alchemists they employed. Stories circulate of rulers who demanded elixirs to cure themselves of aging or illness, who invested fortunes in laboratories, rare ingredients, and the best minds Europe could offer. They monitored experiments closely, sometimes attending demonstrations in person, witnessing reactions, observing outcomes, and weighing every detail as if it could alter their own mortality. Yet, even those with the greatest wealth and influence could not guarantee success. Accidents occurred, substances proved unstable, and the philosopher's stone remained as elusive as ever. Some patrons lost fortunes, others lost faith, and a few disappeared from history under circumstances that remain mysterious. This complex interplay of patronage, ambition, and secrecy also created human drama. Rivalries between alchemists could erupt into lethal confrontations. Apprentices might be coerced into betraying their masters, and patrons themselves could become victims of the very obsession they nurtured. Love, envy, and fear interwove with intellectual pursuit, producing stories as compelling and tragic as any political intrigue of the era. Some alchemists rose to fame and fortune, becoming celebrated advisors. Others were executed, exiled, or erased from memory. The rewards of patronage were immense, but the risks were equally extreme. Moreover, the influence of patrons extended beyond immediate experiments. They often dictated the flow of information, controlling manuscripts, commissioning translations, and shaping networks that would endure for decades. Through patronage, certain discoveries survived, while others were hidden or destroyed. Knowledge became a commodity, its value measured not only in gold, but in political leverage and social capital. An alchemist's success or failure could alter alliances, tip power in favor of one court, or ignite rivalries that reached far beyond the laboratory. In essence, the pursuit of immortality was inseparable from the game of influence, ambition, and secrecy that dominated Europe's elite. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that the world of patrons was as dangerous, intricate, and secretive as the laboratories they funded. They were not mere financiers. They were players in a high-stakes game where knowledge equaled power, and ambition could defy mortality or destroy those who sought it. The audience begins to see that immortality was not only a quest for scholars, but a theater of human ambition, where the stakes were life itself and the moves were made in shadows. And as the viewer imagines torchlit chambers filled with alchemists performing their experiments under the watchful eyes of ambitious rulers, they are left with a chilling realization. The pursuit of eternal life was a game whose rules were written in secrecy, cunning, and blood, and some players would never survive the stakes they set. In the dimly lit studies of Europe, knowledge moved in shadows. Manuscripts, thick, leather-bound volumes, often scrawled in cryptic handwriting, served as the lifeblood of alchemy. These were no ordinary books. They were repositories of hidden wisdom, coded in symbols, diagrams, and arcane language that only the initiated could decipher. Each page might contain the formula for an experiment, a diagram of a laboratory, or a philosophical treatise on the nature of life and death. To outsiders, they appeared as curiosities or nonsense, but for alchemists and patrons alike, they were priceless keys to immortality. The manuscripts were meticulously guarded. They were hidden behind false panels and walls, buried beneath floors, or stored in vaults accessible only to those who had proven their loyalty. Many carried multiple layers of encryption, diagrams overlaid with symbolic meaning, letters rearranged according to obscure ciphers, and words that concealed more than they revealed. Some manuscripts contained intentionally misleading instructions designed to misdirect rivals or prevent the uninitiated from succeeding. To hold one of these books was to wield power, and to lose it, or have it stolen, could mean disaster. These texts were more than practical guides. They were philosophical compasses. Alchemists believed that understanding the transformation of metals was inseparable from understanding the transformation of the soul. Each formula carried symbolic weight. Each experiment represented a moral and intellectual challenge. Some manuscripts described stages of purification that mirrored spiritual journeys, while others contained allegories hinting at life, death, and eternity. They were simultaneously scientific, mystical, and deeply personal. A single text might reflect decades of study, obsession, and peril, its pages imbued with the hopes and fears of generations of alchemists. The movement of manuscripts across Europe was a story of clandestine networks, coded correspondence, and extraordinary risk. Letters and books traveled under the cover of night, disguised as mundane shipments of food, clothing, or official dispatches. Trusted couriers carried these treasures through forests, across rivers, and between hostile territories, constantly aware that discovery could lead to arrest, confiscation, or death. Rival alchemists and spies were always watching, eager to intercept knowledge that could shift the balance of power or grant the upper hand in the pursuit of immortality. The journey of a single manuscript could span hundreds of miles and several years, often passing through multiple hands before reaching its intended recipient. The content of these manuscripts was as varied as it was mysterious. Some detailed chemical reactions capable of producing gold or precious alloys. Others contained instruction for distilling elixirs rumored to prolong life. Still others were philosophical treatises on the interplay between the material and spiritual worlds, the nature of the soul, and the secret laws governing existence. Occasionally, a manuscript hinted at a radical breakthrough, a substance or method that could achieve what had eluded alchemists for centuries. Such hints often led to frenzied attempts to replicate experiments, drawing attention from both allies and enemies, and sometimes ending in tragedy or disaster. The human element of manuscripts was equally compelling. Every book carried the fingerprint of its author, the obsessions, fears, and ambitions of someone who had risked life and reputation to record knowledge. Some manuscripts contained personal warnings, recounting the dangers of specific experiments or the betrayal of apprentices. Others hinted at rivalries, secret societies, or patrons who would stop at nothing to obtain the secrets hidden within. In this way, manuscripts became both guides and chronicles, preserving not just knowledge, but the hidden histories of Europe's secretive world of alchemy. The allure of these texts was irresistible to those who understood their potential. Kings and dukes coveted them, offering wealth, protection, or political favor to secure access. Rival orders sought to steal or destroy them, and individual alchemists devoted decades to copying, translating, and safeguarding their contents. Manuscripts thus became instruments of power, shaping the course of experiments, defining alliances, and influencing the trajectory of alchemy itself. They were the silent witnesses to ambition, obsession, and the relentless pursuit of immortality. Yet, despite their apparent permanence, manuscripts were fragile. Fire, war, theft, and decay threatened to erase centuries of knowledge. Some were deliberately destroyed to protect secrets, others lost in the chaos of political upheaval. The manuscripts that survived are rare, fragmented, and often incomprehensible to all but the most dedicated scholars. Their survival represents a tenuous thread connecting modern understanding to the shadowy ambitions of past generations, offering glimpses into a world that was deliberately hidden from ordinary eyes. By the end of this section, the audience is drawn into the silent tension of alchemical history. These manuscripts were more than books. They were weapons, legacies, and lifelines. They carried knowledge that could change the world, ambitions that could defy death, and warnings written in the trembling hands of those who dared to reach beyond human limits. As the viewer imagines the delicate, candlelit act of turning a fragile page, deciphering cryptic symbols, and following instructions whose meaning is half scientific, half mystical, they are left with a sense of wonder and danger. Knowledge itself had become a battleground, and those who possessed it held the power to alter destiny, for better or worse. Within the hidden laboratories of Europe, alchemists ventured into territories most would deem unthinkable. These were experiments that tested the boundaries of both nature and morality, blending elements of chemistry, mysticism, and obsession into ventures that could produce wonders or horrors. The substances they handled were volatile, their reactions unpredictable, and the line between success and catastrophe razor-thin. Each experiment carried not only the promise of discovery, but also the specter of danger, for a single miscalculation could result in explosions, fires, or poisoning that claimed lives within moments. Some experiments were physical in nature, attempt to transmute base metals into gold, to distill rare essences, or to create elixirs that could prolong life. These experiments required intense concentration, delicate manipulation, and precise timing. Retorts hissed, crucibles glowed, and powders ignited with startling brilliance. Observing these reactions, alchemists recorded every anomaly, every unexpected shimmer, believing that even a failure might hold the key to success. Many experiments spanned months or even years, with the scholar laboring in near-total isolation, tracking results, adjusting formulas, and repeating procedures with painstaking attention. Other experiments were psychological, spiritual, or philosophical, designed to probe the boundaries of the mind and soul. Some alchemists believed that true mastery of immortality required not only chemical knowledge, but moral and spiritual refinement. Rituals were conducted in tandem with physical experiments, meditations, prayers, and symbolic actions intended to align the practitioner with unseen forces. Initiates were tested for courage, patience, and insight, for it was thought that the elixir of life could only be harnessed by those whose mind and soul were sufficiently prepared. Success and failure, in this view, were inseparable from the alchemist's inner state. The dangers of forbidden experiments extended beyond the laboratory. Many alchemists handled rare and toxic substances, some of which were deadly in the smallest amounts. Mercury, lead, arsenic, and other compounds were common in alchemical work, their effects subtle and cumulative. A scholar might succumb to slow poisoning over months, showing signs that were often misunderstood or attributed to natural causes. Accidental inhalation of fumes could incapacitate or kill, while an unstable reaction in a crucible could ignite the workshop, consuming everything within minutes. It was a pursuit where brilliance and death often walked hand in hand. Yet, risk only heightened the allure. Alchemists were drawn to forbidden experiments because they promised insights inaccessible through conventional study. These were the avenues where ordinary rules did not apply, where discovery could yield the extraordinary, and where a single breakthrough might redefine human understanding. The potential rewards were intoxicating. Glimpses of immortality, miraculous cures, or the creation of substances that could bend the natural world to human will. Obsession drove these scholars forward, compelling them to navigate the perilous line between genius and catastrophe. The secrecy surrounding these experiments was absolute. Discovery by the church, by rival alchemists, or by curious outsiders could result in imprisonment, public humiliation, or execution. Laboratories were hidden behind false walls, in secluded forests, or beneath the floors of noble residences. Manuscripts and instructions were encrypted with multiple layers of meaning, and apprentices were rigorously tested for loyalty. Trust was fragile, and even a single betrayal could undo years of work or extinguish a life. In this shadowed world, secrecy was survival. The human element in forbidden experiments was profound. Scholars labored under isolation, obsession, and fear. Friendships could fracture under the pressure of rivalry or suspicion, and romantic entanglements sometimes added layers of complication and betrayal. Masters might suspect apprentices of spying, patrons might demand results with ruthless impatience, and a line between mentorship and manipulation often blurred. The pursuit of immortality became not only a technical endeavor, but a theater of human emotion, where love, envy, fear, and ambition intertwined with every experiment and every decision. Stories of success were rare, but they fueled the ambitions of others. Rumors circulated of substances that could heal disease, metals that could transform, and elixirs that granted extraordinary longevity. Some scholars claimed fleeting victories, glimpses of the philosopher's stone, or temporary effects of elixirs, though these were often unverified and shrouded in legend. Each account became a whispered incentive for others, spreading across secret networks and driving further experimentation. And yet, these victories came at a cost. For many who reached the edge of discovery paid with their health, sanity, or lives. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that forbidden experiments were the heartbeat of alchemical pursuit, a mixture of science, mysticism, and human obsession performed in shadows, with stakes that were often mortal. The audience sees a world where ambition knows no limits, where danger is omnipresent, and where the pursuit of immortality is inseparable from the risks it demands. As viewers imagine candlelit chambers, the hiss of chemicals, and scholars balancing brilliance against peril, they're left with an unsettling awareness. To pursue secrets that defy nature is to court both enlightenment and catastrophe, and some boundaries, once crossed, can never be undone. In a shadowed world of alchemy, the pursuit of immortality was rarely solitary. Rivalries simmered in every hidden laboratory, secret study, and candlelit chamber. Alchemists competed fiercely for the same elusive prize: the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, or the knowledge that could bend the natural world to human will. These competitions were rarely overt. They were subtle, cunning, and often lethal, fought with secrecy, sabotage, and the careful manipulation of information. One misstep could allow a rival to claim decades of painstaking work, or even take a life in the process. Rivalries began at the level of apprenticeships. Young alchemists, ambitious and brilliant, sometimes betrayed mentors for access to secrets or recognition. Masters, in turn, guarded their knowledge jealously, employing tricks, riddles, and coded manuscripts to protect their discoveries. Alliances formed and dissolved with shifting loyalties, as scholars moved between patrons, orders, and cities, always aware that competition was never far behind. Even within a single order, factions emerged, each vying for control of experiments, influence over patrons, and possession of the most promising manuscripts. The pursuit of immortality was a constant negotiation of trust, suspicion, and ambition. The stakes escalated when rival orders became involved. Across Europe, clandestine networks of alchemists operated with overlapping objectives. Some orders prioritized spiritual enlightenment, while others sought wealth, power, or political advantage. Conflicts arose when discoveries threatened to fall into the wrong hands, or when an order suspected that another had uncovered a breakthrough. Spies, infiltrators, and double agents became common, moving silently through the hidden world of alchemy, observing, recording, and sometimes manipulating events to the advantage of their masters. Knowledge itself became a weapon, and every manuscript, every formula, and every experiment carried the weight of potential betrayal. Rivalries were not only professional, but deeply personal. Jealousy, envy, and ambition fueled animosities that could last decades. Scholars observed one another's work with obsessive attention, noting errors, uncovering weaknesses, and waiting for an opportunity to gain the upper hand. Friendships were fragile, alliances temporary, and trust always conditional. Even a successful experiment could ignite conflict, as rivals claimed partial credit or accused each other of deception. In this high-stakes environment, every decision carried risk, and the consequences of failure were often dire. The influence of patrons further complicated these rivalries. Wealthy nobles, kings, and dukes funded multiple alchemists simultaneously, sometimes pitting them against each other to accelerate progress or ensure control over discoveries. Competition for favor, recognition, and support was relentless. A single misstep might cost an alchemist both the patron's trust and the resources needed to continue their work. At the same time, patrons sometimes encouraged secrecy, deception, and sabotage, using rivalries to maintain power over knowledge and keep control of the potentially world-altering discoveries that alchemists sought. Rivalries also drove innovation. The pressure to succeed before a competitor pushed alchemists to refine methods, combine disciplines, and test new theories with extraordinary rigor. Some discoveries that might have taken decades under calm circumstances were achieved in months under intense competition. Yet the cost of such ambition was high. Accidents, poisoning, mental strain, and even death were frequent companions of those who pushed the limits of experimentation. The pursuit of immortality, it seemed, demanded both brilliance and ruthlessness. The danger extended beyond the laboratories themselves. Rival alchemists often resorted to covert actions, breaking into workshops, stealing manuscripts, or deliberately contaminating experiments. Some disputes ended in violence, with assassinations, mysterious disappearances, or public scandals designed to destroy reputations. The shadowy network of spies and informants ensured that knowledge was never safe, and success often depended as much on cunning and subterfuge as on skill or intellect. Each breakthrough was a beacon, attracting both admiration and peril. Despite these dangers, rivalries were inseparable from the story of alchemy. They drove the pursuit of the philosopher's stone forward, sharpened intellects, and created a tapestry of intrigue that wove together ambition, obsession, and secrecy. The audience begins to see that the alchemist's path was never linear or solitary. It was a maze of challenges, threats, and cunning maneuvers. Every experiment was a contest, every manuscript a prize, and every secret a potential weapon. In this shadowed world, survival required intelligence, patience, and the courage to risk everything for the chance at immortality. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that rivalries in the dark were as crucial to alchemy as the laboratories themselves. They were the hidden engine driving discovery, conflict, and obsession, shaping the course of knowledge and ambition in ways that remain invisible in the history books. As viewers imagine candlelit confrontations, secret messages, and shadowy plots unfolding in corridors and workshops across Europe, they are left with a sense of tension, danger, and awe. The pursuit of immortality was not only a test of intellect, but a battle of wits, courage, and survival, where rivals lurked in every corner and betrayal could strike at any moment. Among the most coveted and legendary of alchemical pursuits was the elixir of life. Whispers of its existence traveled across Europe, carried in secret letters, hidden manuscripts, and hushed conversations in candlelit chambers. This mythical substance promised more than longevity. It offered the tantalizing possibility of defying death itself. Monarchs dreamed of drinking it to extend their reigns. Scholars longed for it, as the ultimate proof of human mastery over nature. And yet, for every tantalizing story, the reality of the pursuit was far more dangerous, obsessive, and tragic than the myth suggested. The elixir was never just a potion. It was a symbol of ultimate power and human ambition. Alchemists believed it could cure all diseases, rejuvenate the body, and even grant immunity to the decay of age. The search for the elixir drove scholars to risk their lives in pursuit of ingredients that were rare, toxic, or nearly impossible to procure. Some substances came from distant lands, carried secretly through forests, mountains, and seas. Others required complex chemical processes, extreme precision, and the patient observation of subtle reactions over months or even years. The elixir was the epitome of human obsession, a prize worth any cost. Stories of failed attempts were as numerous as those of hope. Laboratories exploded, apprentices were poisoned, and masters vanished without a trace. The alchemist's work was painstaking and dangerous, yet the allure of the elixir kept the pursuit alive. Every failure became a lesson, every anomaly a clue, and every fleeting success a glimmer of promise. Scholars often became consumed, spending decades locked away in isolation, driven by a singular desire to taste immortality. The human cost of this obsession was immense. Health deteriorated, relationships broke down, and in many cases, minds frayed under the weight of endless trial and expectation. Patrons are captivated by the elixir as well. Wealthy nobles, kings, and dukes invested fortunes in its creation, offering protection, ingredients, and access to secret laboratories. Some patronized multiple alchemists at once, hoping to accelerate progress or uncover the elusive formula through competition. Yet even with immense resources, the elixir remained maddeningly out of reach. Reports of partial successes or fleeting results created hope, but these were often exaggerated, misunderstood, or deliberately misleading. The tension between expectation and reality fueled intrigue, rivalry, and sometimes tragedy as desperate patrons pushed scholars to take greater risks. The elixir was also wrapped in symbolism and spiritual philosophy. Many alchemists believed that to achieve it, one needed not only skill with materials, but also moral and spiritual refinement. Rituals accompanied chemical processes, prayers were whispered over bubbling vials, and meditation was practiced to harmonize mind and body. Success, they believed, required a balance between intellectual mastery and personal purity. Failure was interpreted as a reflection of the alchemist's inner imperfections, weaknesses of character, ambition unchecked, or an inability to attune oneself to the natural forces at work. The pursuit was as much about self-transformation as it was about discovering a physical substance. Some accounts suggest the elixir's effects were fleeting, mysterious, or misunderstood. Scholars sometimes observed temporary rejuvenation in themselves or others, only for the benefits to vanish as quickly as they appeared. The more extraordinary claims, immortality, eternal youth, remained elusive, often cloaked in allegory or mysticism. Nevertheless, these stories sustained the dream, fueling the next generation of alchemists who inherited manuscripts, techniques, and obsessions from their predecessors. The quest for the elixir became a multi-generational pursuit, a chain linking ambition, hope, and tragedy across centuries. The search for the elixir of life also intersected with political intrigue. Monarchs who believed in its potential sought to control its production, sometimes compelling alchemists to work in secrecy under threat of imprisonment or execution. Rival factions and courts attempted to intercept knowledge, sabotage experiments, or acquire manuscripts through theft. The elixir was more than a chemical mystery. It was a source of power, a symbol of dominion over life itself, and a prize that could tilt the delicate balance of authority across Europe. Every discovery, every secret, carried not only scientific significance, but political weight. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a profound understanding of the elixir's dual nature, a symbol of human aspiration and a source of peril. It embodies the extraordinary lengths to which men and women went to defy mortality, blending ambition, obsession, science, and mysticism into a pursuit that shaped the course of European alchemy. As viewers imagine candlelit laboratories, bubbling elixirs, and alchemists driven to extremes by desire and fear, they're confronted with a central question. How far would humanity go to cheat death? And at what cost to themselves, their peers, and the world around them? In the shadowed corridors of alchemy, trust was rare and betrayal was ever present. Ambition and secrecy, the twin pillars of the alchemist's pursuit, often created a fertile ground for treachery. Masters and apprentices, collaborators and rivals, patrons and scholars, all navigated a world where knowledge could be weaponized, allegiance could shift in an instant, and a single misstep might lead to ruin. Betrayal was not only a possibility, it was an inevitability in a pursuit that promised immortality but delivered peril at every turn. Apprentices, eager to prove themselves, sometimes stole secrets from their masters, copying manuscripts, formulas, or diagrams for personal gain. These betrayals were often subtle, concealed behind loyalty and feigned obedience until the damage had been done. Rival alchemists infiltrated laboratories, posing as students or allies, only to report discoveries back to competing orders. Even seasoned masters, who had spent decades building networks of trust, could be deceived, their hard-won experiments appropriated or destroyed. In this hidden world, betrayal was a survival tactic, and cunning often outweighed brilliance. The stakes were highest when patrons were involved. Rulers, dukes, and wealthy nobles sometimes demanded that alchemists share their most valuable secrets, offering protection or wealth in return, or threatening ruin and death. An alchemist caught withholding knowledge might face imprisonment or execution, while sharing a secret could inadvertently empower a rival or undermine a patron's plan. The constant tension between loyalty to patrons, fellow scholars, and one's own ambitions created an environment in which betrayal was a calculated, sometimes necessary, act. Every choice carried moral, intellectual, and mortal consequences. Some betrayals were dramatic, almost cinematic in their execution. Manuscripts were stolen under the cover of night, experiments sabotaged with a single miscalculated ingredient, or secret messages intercepted and redirected to rival factions. In other cases, betrayal was subtle, a whispered suggestion, a manipulated result, or an encrypted letter that misled a colleague for months. The outcomes could be catastrophic: fires destroying laboratories, poisons contaminating critical substances, or entire orders destabilized by the theft of a single formula. In this world, even the smallest act of treachery could ripple outward, leaving devastation in its wake. Yet betrayal was not always malicious. Some alchemists acted out of desperation, fear, or survival instinct. A scholar might sell knowledge to a patron to protect family, repay debts, or secure safety. Rivals sometimes intervened to prevent dangerous experiments from harming themselves or others. The blurred line between self-preservation and treachery created moral ambiguity, leaving historians and modern observers to speculate on the true motives behind actions recorded in fragmented manuscripts and cryptic letters. In alchemy, morality was as complex and layered as the experiments themselves. The consequences of betrayal extended beyond immediate danger. Relationships within orders could fracture irreparably, networks of trust could collapse, and the flow of knowledge could be disrupted for decades. A single act of treachery might shift the balance of power between orders, patrons, and regions, altering the course of experimentation, discovery, and even history itself. Rival alchemists could gain advantage. Patrons could manipulate results for political gain, and knowledge could be lost, corrupted, or misinterpreted. Betrayal was a force capable of reshaping entire networks of secrecy and ambition. The human drama of betrayal added emotional intensity to the alchemist's world. Friends became adversaries, protégés turned against mentors, and lovers sometimes conspired to seize knowledge or power. Fear, envy, and ambition intertwined with intellectual pursuit, creating a tension that was both psychological and existential. Scholars were constantly on edge, aware that someone close could exploit their work, undermine their reputation, or destroy their life's labor in an instant. The pursuit of immortality, it seemed, demanded not only skill and intelligence, but vigilance, cunning, and emotional resilience. In many ways, betrayal was also a catalyst for progress. Competition forced alchemists to refine techniques, encode manuscripts more securely, and develop methods to safeguard knowledge. The constant threat of deception honed ingenuity and precision, pushing experimentation to higher levels of sophistication. Yet, this progress was paid for in human cost. Broken trust, ruined reputations, lost lives, and decades of work lost to deceit or misfortune. The alchemist's world was a landscape in which brilliance and treachery existed side by side, inseparable from one another. By the end of this section, the audience understands that the alchemist's pursuit was not merely a scientific or mystical endeavor. It was a theater of human emotion, where betrayal, ambition, and secrecy shaped every action. Trust was fragile, loyalty fleeting, and the pursuit of immortality always fraught with danger. As viewers imagine hidden laboratories, secret manuscripts, and whispered schemes unfolding in candlelit shadows, they are left with a haunting realization. In the pursuit of eternal life, the greatest threat often came not from failure, but from those closest to you. If the elixir of life represented immortality in liquid form, the philosopher's stone symbolized ultimate mastery over matter itself. It was said to transform base metals into gold, purify substances, and hold the key to eternal life. For centuries, it captivated the imagination of alchemists, scholars, and rulers alike, becoming the holy grail of European alchemy. Its legend was fueled by cryptic manuscripts, whispered stories, and the dreams of countless seekers who believed that a single object could alter the fate of humanity. The search for the philosopher's stone was as perilous as it was obsessive. Alchemists devoted decades to experiments that often failed spectacularly, enduring fire, poison, and isolation in the pursuit of a single breakthrough. Laboratories were filled with glowing vials, bubbling retorts, and powders whose colors and textures seemed to change with every experiment. Every detail mattered. The timing of heating, the sequence of reactions, and even the spiritual or moral state of the alchemist were believed to influence success. The quest was a perfect fusion of science, mysticism, and human ambition. Unlike the elixir, which promised life extension, the stone was a tool of transformation. It symbolized power, wealth, and dominion over nature itself. Monarchs and wealthy patrons saw it as a means to secure influence, finance wars, or display unmatched prestige. Scholars approached it as a pinnacle of intellectual achievement, a proof that humanity could unlock the deepest secrets of existence. For both alchemist and patron, the stone was the ultimate prize, and its pursuit became a game of wit, strategy, and endurance. Yet the philosopher's stone was shrouded in secrecy and mysticism. Instructions were encoded in obscure symbols, allegories, and arcane language. Texts often warned that only the morally and spiritually prepared could succeed. Failure was seen not only as a practical disappointment, but as a reflection of one's character or soul. Some alchemists claimed that the stone could only be created under specific celestial conditions, in a laboratory purified by ritual, and with a mind entirely devoted to the task. These restrictions made the pursuit even more elusive, fueling obsession and testing the limits of human patience and ingenuity. Rivalries, betrayal, and ambition intensified the search for the stone. Scholars guarded manuscripts and experiments fiercely, aware that a single leak could allow a rival to claim glory or wealth. Patrons, eager for results, pressured their alchemists to accelerate experiments, sometimes disregarding safety or ethical boundaries. Apprentices were both assistants and potential threats, and the complex networks of secrecy ensured that knowledge moved cautiously through hidden channels. In this environment, every action had consequence, and the line between genius and madness was razor thin. Stories of partial successes and miraculous effects circulated, keeping hope alive. A substance might temporarily turn copper to gold, heal minor ailments, or produce vivid chemical reactions interpreted as signs of progress. These fleeting victories drove further experimentation, despite repeated failure. Generations of alchemists built on the fragmented achievements of their predecessors, refining methods, creating new tools, and perpetuating an enduring cycle of ambition, hope, and disappointment. Each attempt brought humanity a fraction closer to understanding the mysteries of matter and life. The human cost of pursuing the philosopher's stone was immense. Scholars endured physical danger, mental strain, and social isolation. Friendships were tested by envy, alliances were fragile, and rivalries sometimes escalated to violence or sabotage. Many devoted their entire lives to a single goal, risking not only their health, but their very existence. Yet, despite the odds, the allure of ultimate knowledge, wealth, and immortality was irresistible, compelling individuals to continue the search in defiance of reason, danger, and mortality. By the end of this section, the audience comprehends that the philosopher's stone was far more than a mythical object. It was the embodiment of human ambition, intellect, and obsession. It represented the desire to control life, matter, and destiny itself, a pursuit that blurred the boundaries between science and mysticism, genius and madness. As viewers imagine candlelit laboratories, enigmatic symbols, and the meticulous experiments of determined alchemists, they are left with awe and curiosity. The stone was not just a substance, but a testament to the human drive to transcend limits, a quest that shaped both knowledge and imagination for centuries. The world of alchemy was not isolated from the spiritual life of Europe. It existed in a delicate, often dangerous balance with religion. For centuries, the church dominated intellectual and moral authority, and alchemists had to navigate this complex landscape with caution. Many scholars framed their experiments in religious terms, arguing that their work revealed the divine order of creation. The transformation of metals, purification of substances, and pursuit of immortality were often couched as metaphors for spiritual enlightenment and moral perfection. In essence, the laboratory became a place where science, mysticism, and faith intertwined. Yet, this union was precarious. Church authorities were wary of practices that seemed to challenge divine authority or natural law. An alchemist's claim to create gold, cure disease, or discover a substance that could prolong life could be interpreted as blasphemy or heresy. Some scholars faced scrutiny, interrogation, or even imprisonment, while others were forced to disguise their experiments behind metaphor, allegory, and coded manuscripts. The need for secrecy was heightened by the fear that the pursuit of immortality could be seen as an attempt to rival God's power, a notion both tempting and dangerous to those devoted to the faith. Many alchemists reconciled their work with religion by emphasizing the moral and spiritual dimensions of their experiments. They claimed that only the pure of heart could achieve true transformation, that the manipulation of substances mirrored the purification of the soul, and that divine guidance was essential for success. In this context, alchemy was a spiritual journey as much as a scientific one. Rituals, prayers, and meditations often accompanied chemical processes, reflecting the belief that human mastery over matter required alignment with higher forces. Failure, it was said, might reflect a lapse in virtue or spiritual readiness, making moral conduct inseparable from experimental success. The tension between innovation and orthodoxy created an atmosphere of duality. Scholars sought to expand human knowledge while avoiding the wrath of religious authorities. This delicate balance shaped how alchemy was practiced, documented, and transmitted. Manuscripts were carefully encoded, symbols carried layered meanings, and experiments were often shrouded in secrecy. Religious language provided cover for radical experimentation, allowing alchemists to explore forbidden territories while maintaining the appearance of piety. This interplay between faith and ambition produced some of the most enigmatic and symbolic texts in history, where every diagram, allegory, and formula carried both practical and spiritual significance. Some alchemists went further, interpreting their work as a form of divine collaboration. They believed that God had given humans the potential to understand the hidden laws of creation and that the philosopher's stone or the elixir of life represented glimpses of divine perfection. In this view, experiments were prayers, chemical reactions became reflections of cosmic order, and discovery was a sacred act. This philosophical approach allowed alchemists to reconcile the pursuit of extraordinary power with religious devotion, framing ambition as a form of worship rather than rebellion. However, not all interactions between alchemy and religion were harmonious. The Church, at times, condemned or suppressed alchemical practice, particularly when it seemed to promise wealth, immortality, or the manipulation of natural law. Trials, excommunications, and confiscations were not uncommon, and some alchemists lived in constant fear of persecution. These pressures heightened the sense of danger, secrecy, and intrigue surrounding alchemical work, and reinforced the mystique that surrounds it even today. Knowledge became both a source of power and a potential curse, dependent on discretion, wisdom, and the ability to navigate the treacherous interface of science and faith. The human drama in this section is profound. Scholars often struggled with moral dilemmas, torn between ambition and piety, curiosity and caution. Some succumbed to fear, destroying their own work to avoid persecution. Others embraced risk, believing their pursuit of knowledge aligned with divine will. Conflicts arose within orders, families, and communities, creating tension that shaped the transmission of knowledge, the development of experimentation techniques, and the history of European alchemy itself. Religion was not merely a backdrop. It was a shaping force, influencing what could be attempted, what could be recorded, and what could survive the centuries. By the end of this section, the audience sees that alchemy cannot be separated from the spiritual and religious context of its time. The pursuit of immortality, gold, and transformation was intertwined with faith, morality, and divine aspiration. The candlelit laboratories, coded manuscripts, and secret experiments were arenas where human ambition and spiritual devotion coexisted, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes in tension. Viewers are left with the sense that the alchemist's work was as much about understanding the human soul and its place in the cosmos as it was about mastering matter. Faith, ambition, secrecy, and knowledge all converged in this extraordinary, perilous pursuit, showing that the quest for immortality was not just a scientific journey, but a profoundly human and spiritual odyssey. As the centuries passed, alchemy became more than a solitary pursuit. It transformed into a network of secret brotherhoods, hidden societies of scholars, mystics, and visionaries bound together by shared knowledge and shared danger. These clandestine orders operated in the shadows of Europe's great cities, meeting behind locked doors, in candlelit chambers, or within the hidden wings of monasteries. They guarded their secrets with vows, symbols, and oaths, protecting their members from persecution while ensuring that their discoveries would not fall into the wrong hands. These brotherhoods emerged out of necessity. The Church's suspicion of alchemy, combined with political intrigue and the greed of nobles, made secrecy essential. Those who delved too deeply into forbidden sciences risked being accused of heresy or witchcraft. Brotherhoods provided protection, a sanctuary where knowledge could be shared safely, away from the eyes of inquisitors and spies. Members swore loyalty not to kings or clergy, but to truth itself. To be part of such a circle was both an honor and a burden, for discovery came with the price of lifelong silence. Within these secret orders, knowledge was transmitted through symbols and coded texts. Initiates began as apprentices, learning the basics of chemistry, natural philosophy, and spiritual discipline. As they progressed, they were exposed to deeper mysteries, the cycles of transformation, the hidden meanings behind metals, and the spiritual allegories woven into the structure of the cosmos. Meetings often resembled sacred rituals. Each movement, each word, held significance, echoing ancient wisdom believed to have descended from Egypt, Babylon, or even older civilizations lost to time. Some of the most famous alchemical brotherhoods became legends in their own right. The Rosicrucians, whose mysterious manifestos circulated across Europe in the 17th century, claimed to preserve the invisible college of knowledge, a secret fellowship devoted to spiritual enlightenment and universal transformation. They combined alchemy, mysticism, and esoteric Christianity, proclaiming that the world's renewal depended on hidden wisdom guarded through generations. Whether they truly existed or were symbolic constructs remains debated, but their influence reshaped Europe's intellectual landscape. Other orders were more pragmatic, operating as networks of scholars exchanging information under pseudonyms. They created ciphers, invented elaborate symbolic alphabets, and used emblems, like the serpent eating its tail or the phoenix rising from ashes, to identify themselves discreetly. Their correspondence stretched across borders, uniting minds from Italy, France, England, and beyond. In their letters, practical experiments merged with spiritual reflection, and the tone was one of both awe and humility before the mysteries of creation. But secrecy also bred paranoia. Betrayal was always a possibility, and brotherhoods were vulnerable to infiltration. Spies posing as scholars sought to uncover their secrets for patrons, rival orders, or political powers. The fear of exposure created an atmosphere of constant vigilance. Meetings were held in rotating locations, documents hidden behind false walls or beneath floorboards, and initiations conducted under cover of darkness. Those who violated their oaths faced expulsion, or worse. The invisible nature of these brotherhoods made them both powerful and fragile, existing like smoke between the cracks of society. Despite the secrecy, their influence extended far beyond laboratories. Many of Europe's greatest thinkers, astronomers, mathematicians, philosophers, were connected in some way to these hidden networks. They exchanged not only formulas and symbols, but ideas about morality, existence, and the divine structure of the universe. Their discussions helped shape the birth of modern science, though often hidden beneath layers of mystic allegory. The brotherhoods served as bridges between the ancient world of myth and the emerging age of reason, preserving old wisdom even as new knowledge dawned. The emotional weight of these societies lay in their duality. They were both protectors of light and prisoners of secrecy. Members carried the immense responsibility of guarding humanity's deepest secrets, knowledge that could transform the world, yet destroy it if misused. The tension between revelation and concealment, ambition and humility, defined their existence. Some members yearned to share their discoveries with the world, believing that enlightenment belonged to all. Others insisted that humanity was not yet ready, that the uninitiated would turn divine knowledge into chaos or war. This conflict of ideals would echo across centuries, influencing everything from secret societies to modern science. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a haunting image of Europe's hidden brotherhoods. Cloaked figures gathered around flickering candlelight, their faces half in shadow, discussing secrets that could change the course of history. Their oaths echo through time, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge often walks hand in hand with danger, and that truth in the wrong hands can become a weapon. These brotherhoods ensured that alchemy's light never fully went out, even as the world outside turned darker and more skeptical. Their invisible legacy remains, woven through the very fabric of Western thought, whispering that there are still secrets, ancient, powerful, and forbidden, waiting to be uncovered. As the Age of Enlightenment began to dawn, the old world of mysticism and secrecy began to tremble. The brotherhoods that had once thrived in the shadows found themselves at the edge of a new age, an age that demanded proof, logic, and open experimentation. Yet even as science began to rise, the spirit of alchemy refused to fade away. Its essence, its yearning for transformation, lingered quietly in the hearts of those who still sought more than material truth. They saw that the outer world could be measured, but the inner one, of dreams, intuition, and wonder, remained just as mysterious as ever. In laboratories across Europe, men once called alchemists began to call themselves chemists and natural philosophers. But in their quiet hours by candlelight, many still whispered old words and drew ancient symbols in the margins of their notebooks. They had not forgotten that their search was not merely for gold or power, but for understanding, the unity between spirit and matter. The instruments became more precise, the experiments more disciplined, but behind it all, the echo of transformation still rang softly, reminding them of what once was sacred. In a small room in Prague, an aged scholar might still trace the sign of Mercury before mixing his powders, believing that matter itself responded to intention. In a French abbey, a monk might copy an old alchemical manuscript, convinced that hidden within its lines lay truths about the soul. And in England, a man like Isaac Newton, known for his equations and the laws of motion, spent countless nights studying coded alchemical texts, believing that the physical and divine were bound by the same secret design. These moments, scattered across time, formed a quiet bridge between the mystic and the scientific, a golden thread connecting two worlds that never truly separated. Outside, however, the world was changing. Cities grew louder, trade routes expanded, and printing presses flooded Europe with new ideas. The sacred secrecy of the brotherhoods gave way to the public curiosity of academies and salons. Knowledge was no longer hidden. It was debated, printed, and sold. The quiet candlelight of hidden chambers was replaced by the bright oil lamps of lecture halls. But even there, amid chalk and glass flasks, a strange reverence remained. For some, science became the new form of faith, the belief that within the laws of nature lay a divine order, waiting to be revealed. Alchemy's symbols began to evolve. The serpent eating its tail became a metaphor for infinity in mathematics. The philosopher's stone turned into an idea, a symbol of human potential, the drive to perfect both mind and spirit. The furnace of transformation moved from the alchemist's workshop into the human soul. Where once men had sought to change lead into gold, they now sought to turn ignorance into wisdom. The dream had not died. It had merely changed shape. Those who still held the old wisdom gathered quietly, preserving what they could before it vanished completely. In the mountains of Switzerland, in the libraries of Italy, in forgotten corners of Spain, manuscripts were hidden, handwritten, coded, sometimes sealed in wax. They were meant not for their time, but for a future one, for seekers who would come when the world was ready again to listen. These forgotten texts would later inspire philosophers, poets, and even early psychologists who began to see the symbols of alchemy not as superstition, but as reflections of the human psyche. The story of transformation, after all, was never just about matter. It was about the human condition, the struggle between darkness and light, ignorance and understanding, decay and renewal. Each alchemical process mirrored something within us: calcination, the burning away of illusion; dissolution, the surrender to change; coagulation, the rebirth of form from chaos. These metaphors, passed down through centuries, became the language of self-discovery. And even as the scientific world advanced, many quietly returned to these inner teachings, recognizing that true gold was not found in crucibles, but in consciousness. As centuries passed, the remnants of alchemy intertwined with art, poetry, and philosophy. Painters depicted the transformation of elements as visions of divine awakening. Poets wrote of inner fire and celestial union. Psychologists like Carl Jung would later look upon the old symbols and see reflections of the soul's journey, seeing in the alchemist's work the mirror of human evolution. Through them, the alchemist's voices spoke again, whispering that every life, every struggle, every dream of change was a part of the same great process, the endless dance of creation transforming itself. Now, as the night deepens in our story, the echo of transformation lingers. The flames that once glowed beneath the alchemist's furnace are long extinguished, yet their warmth remains in the human spirit. We still seek to turn what is base into what is beautiful, to find meaning in mystery, to bring light from shadow. The alchemists may have vanished, their brotherhoods scattered and their manuscripts buried under centuries of dust, but their essence endures wherever curiosity meets wonder, wherever a soul dares to dream of more. And as the listener rests beneath the quiet rhythm of this thought, it becomes clear that transformation was never an ancient pursuit. It is the heartbeat of existence itself. Every dawn, every breath, Every moment of awakening repeats the same promise whispered through the centuries, that nothing is truly lost, only changed, only waiting to be rediscovered by those who still listen. In the silent corners of old libraries and forgotten monasteries, whispers of parchment still breathe beneath layers of dust. These are not ordinary manuscripts. They're fragments of a vanished world, traces of minds that dared to write what could never be spoken aloud. Across Europe, from the misted abbeys of France to the cold cellars of Prague, secret writings were hidden away, sealed with wax, encrypted in symbols, or buried inside the covers of harmless-looking texts. They were the last messages of those who feared not death, but erasure. For the alchemists knew that one day the world would forget them, and so they wrote for those who would one day remember. Some of these manuscripts were written in languages that have no true key, filled with diagrams of stars and serpents, vessels and circles intertwined. Margins bloom with drawings of winged figures and eyes of fire, their meanings lost to time. Many of these texts surfaced centuries later, baffling scholars. Some were dismissed as nonsense. Others were locked away again, labeled undecipherable. But to those who read between the lines, these works carried something deeper, a pulse, a hidden code, not meant for logic, but for intuition. For the language of alchemy was not a science of words. It was a map of experience, meant to awaken memory rather than inform mind. In one crumbling codex found in Spain, a symbol appears, a circle divided by 7 rays, each representing a stage of transformation. Beneath it, a line reads, "He who sees beyond the veil will never again fear the fire." Another manuscript, discovered in a German abbey, describes a process called the Second Dawn, where the alchemist must die symbolically before the stone can live. These phrases sound poetic, but they were practical to those who wrote them. They were instructions, not for transmuting metals, but for awakening the soul from its sleep. In the 17th and 18th centuries, as the world shifted toward reason and progress, the guardians of these manuscripts faced a choice: destroy what might condemn them, or hide it so deeply that only destiny could reveal it again. Many chose the latter. Whole libraries were sealed in walls, their owners hoping that future centuries would rediscover what their own had rejected. Some collections disappeared entirely, taken across borders by wandering scholars or swallowed by the chaos of war. There are stories, half myth, half record, of manuscripts carried in caravans from Europe to the Middle East, where the ancient knowledge of Alexandria still lingered in memory. There, under different stars, the teachings merged with Sufi, Hermetic, and Kabbalistic thought, forming new shapes of wisdom hidden behind poetry and prayer. One of the strangest examples is the Voynich manuscript, a book that defies every rule of language. Its pages are filled with strange plants that do not exist, astrological charts that lead nowhere, and human figures bathing in pools of green water. No one has ever fully decoded it. Some claim it was written by an alchemist who wished to encode not facts, but the rhythm of nature itself, a living riddle that could only be understood by one who had already awakened the inner sight. Others say it is the work of a fraud, a curiosity meant to deceive. Yet, when one gazes upon its pages, there is a quiet magnetism, a sense that it holds more than madness, that it hums with something ancient and half-remembered. The truth, perhaps, lies between myth and mathematics. For the alchemists were both dreamers and engineers, and their manuscripts reflected that duality. Behind every poetic symbol was an experiment, and behind every experiment, a prayer. They believed that matter could respond to consciousness, that a pure heart could alter the structure of reality itself. In their drawings of furnaces, retorts, and crucibles, they hid metaphors for meditation and purification. When they wrote of distillation, they meant not only the refining of liquids, but of thought, clarity drawn drop by drop through the heat of experience. Even today, fragments of these manuscripts continue to surface. A few lines found in an Italian archive might match a diagram in a Polish collection. The ink fades, but the message remains. The same dream, the same call toward transformation. Modern historians often approach them with skepticism, yet even they cannot ignore the beauty of the language, the depth of imagination. Some see in them the birth of modern chemistry. Others sense the echo of a philosophy that understood the world as alive, conscious, and infinitely interconnected. Imagine, for a moment, one of these manuscripts being opened after centuries of silence. The parchment breathes, the faint scent of time escapes, and the ink, brown, almost red, forms letters that look more like wounds than words. The reader's candle flickers, casting shapes that dance like spirits across the page. As the symbols unfold, something stirs in the air, a sense that the room itself is listening. It is as if the manuscript remembers being read, as if the thoughts that created it are still there, waiting to be seen again. For the alchemists believe that every act of creation leaves an imprint, that the written word carries energy as real as the metal it describes. To read such a text was to enter into a dialogue with the past, a communion with those who once risked their lives for what they believed was divine knowledge. And those centuries have passed, their words still burn softly, guiding the curious, the dreamers, the seekers who refuse to accept that the material world is all there is. Somewhere, perhaps, another hidden manuscript remains, sealed in the foundation of an old abbey or lying beneath a forgotten floorboard. And maybe, as night deepens and wind brushes through the broken glass of an abandoned monastery, those old pages stir faintly, as if calling out to the next one brave enough to listen. There are secrets that hide not in words, but in the spaces between them. For centuries, alchemists were forced to speak in riddles, their wisdom encrypted in symbols, parables, and metaphors that only the initiated could interpret. To read an alchemical manuscript was not to read a book. It was to navigate a labyrinth of meaning, where truth shimmered like gold beneath layers of illusion. This hidden language became known as the Alchemist's Code, and its purpose was not only to conceal knowledge from the unworthy, but to test the soul of the seeker. To decode it, one had to think like an alchemist, to balance reason with intuition, science with spirit. Every symbol, every color, every element was chosen with care. The sun and moon did not merely represent celestial bodies. They were forces of duality, consciousness and unconsciousness, sulfur and mercury, masculine and feminine, the eternal dance of opposites that govern creation. Gold was not simply a metal. It was perfection, the completion of the great work, the purified essence of being. Lead, on the other hand, symbolized ignorance, heaviness, the raw beginning of the soul's transformation. The journey from lead to gold, from base matter to divine light, was a mirror of human awakening. The code was so intricate that even among alchemists, full understanding was rare. Some devoted their lives to a single manuscript, never certain whether they had uncovered a chemical process or a spiritual revelation. The text demanded not only intellect, but humility. They whispered, "You cannot grasp truth. You must become it." In this way, the code acted as both shield and teacher. It protected the mysteries from those who sought only power, while guiding those who approached with reverence toward deeper insight. In the 15th and 16th centuries, as the Inquisition hunted heresy, The alchemist code became a lifeline. Words that might once have spoken openly of transformation and divine union were rewritten as allegories about metallurgy, astrology, or herbal medicine. Yet beneath this disguise, entire philosophies of existence were hidden. An innocent description of refining silver might conceal an instruction for meditation. A drawing of a dragon devouring its tail could point to the cyclical nature of the soul's evolution. Each person who recognizes the light contributes to the continuity of the eternal fire. The ultimate revelation of the flame is that it binds past, present, and future. In every experiment, every reflection, every act of courage and creation, the knowledge of centuries lives on. The work of those who pursued immortality, whether through metals, words, or symbols, was never in vain. Their greatest gift was not gold or life everlasting, but the example of their pursuit, a demonstration that humanity is capable of reaching beyond the mundane toward the extraordinary. And in that striving, the eternal flame shines. At the end of this journey through hidden laboratories, secret orders, and the restless pursuit of transformation, one truth crystallizes. The flame of the alchemists is both within and beyond us. It is the light of curiosity, the fire of moral courage, and the quiet brilliance of insight. It reminds us that even in a world of fleeting time and shifting shadows, there exists something eternal, a current of knowledge and wisdom that flows quietly through human history, waiting for those who will recognize it. And so, the great work continues in laboratories, in libraries, in quiet contemplation, and in the hearts of those who dare to dream beyond the surface of reality. The eternal flame is not a treasure to be hoarded, nor a secret to be feared. It is a living truth that can illuminate life itself. To follow it is to participate in a lineage that stretches across centuries, connecting every human heart to the hidden pulse of the cosmos. As the screen fades to black, one thought lingers, a whisper through time. What if the true secret of alchemy was never in the metals, the stones, or the potions, but in the unbroken spark of transformation that resides within us all? Perhaps the greatest alchemists were not the men in their hidden chambers, but every human who dares to look inward, to cultivate wisdom, and to carry the flame into the unknown future. The eternal flame endures, silent yet radiant, a testament to the hidden quest of the alchemists, a reminder that the great work is never finished, and that within every one of us burns the possibility of transmutation, enlightenment, and timeless understanding. Even a recipe for gold might be nothing more than a prayer for enlightenment, written in the language of fire and metal. Those who guarded the code believed that it reflected the structure of the universe itself, a language of harmony that bound all things together. To them, numbers and geometry were not abstractions, but living expressions of divine order. The circle represented unity. The triangle symbolized manifestation. The square, the world of matter. And the pentagram, the human being caught between heaven and earth, striving toward balance. To the uninitiated, these were mere shapes. To the alchemists, they were keys. Within the hidden laboratories of Europe, alchemists ventured into territories most would deem unthinkable. These were experiments that tested the boundaries of both nature and morality, blending elements of chemistry, mysticism, and obsession into ventures that could produce wonders or horrors. The substances they handled were volatile, their reactions unpredictable, and the line between success and catastrophe razor thin. Each experiment carried not only the promise of discovery, but also the specter of danger. For a single miscalculation could result in explosions, fires, or poisoning that claimed lives within moments. Some experiments were physical in nature, attempt to transmute base metals into gold, to distill rare essences, or to create elixirs that could prolong life. These experiments required intense concentration, delicate manipulation, and precise timing. Retorts hissed, crucibles glowed, and powders ignited with startling brilliance. Observing these reactions, alchemists recorded every anomaly, every unexpected shimmer, believing that even a failure might hold the key to success. Many experiments spanned months or even years, with the scholar laboring in near-total isolation, tracking results, adjusting formulas, and repeating procedures with painstaking attention. Other experiments were psychological, spiritual, or philosophical, designed to probe the boundaries of the mind and soul. Some alchemists believed that true mastery of immortality required not only chemical knowledge, but moral and spiritual refinement. Rituals were conducted in tandem with physical experiments, meditations, prayers, and symbolic actions intended to align the practitioner with unseen forces. Initiates were tested for courage, patience, and insight, for it was thought that the elixir of life could only be harnessed by those whose mind and soul were sufficiently prepared. Success and failure, in this view, were inseparable from the alchemist's inner state. The dangers of forbidden experiments extended beyond the laboratory. Many alchemists handled rare and toxic substances, some of which were deadly in the smallest amounts. Mercury, lead, arsenic, and other compounds were common in alchemical work, their effects subtle and cumulative. A scholar might succumb to slow poisoning over months, showing signs that were often misunderstood or attributed to natural causes. Accidental inhalation of fumes could incapacitate or kill, while an unstable reaction in a crucible could ignite the workshop, consuming everything within minutes. It was a pursuit where brilliance and death often walked hand in hand. Yet, risk only heightened the allure. Alchemists were drawn to forbidden experiments because they promised insights inaccessible through conventional study. These were the avenues where ordinary rules did not apply, where discovery could yield the extraordinary, and where a single breakthrough might redefine human understanding. The potential rewards were intoxicating. Glimpses of immortality, miraculous cures, or the creation of substances that could bend the natural world to human will. Obsession drove these scholars forward, compelling them to navigate the perilous line between genius and catastrophe. The secrecy surrounding these experiments was absolute. Discovery by the church, by rival alchemists, or by curious outsiders could result in imprisonment, public humiliation, or execution. Laboratories were hidden behind false walls, in secluded forests, or beneath the floors of noble residences. Manuscripts and instructions were encrypted with multiple layers of meaning, and apprentices were rigorously tested for loyalty. Trust was fragile, and even a single betrayal could undo years of work or extinguish a life. In this shadowed world, secrecy was survival. The human element in forbidden experiments was profound. Scholars labored under isolation, obsession, and fear. Friendships could fracture under the pressure of rivalry or suspicion, and romantic entanglements sometimes added layers of complication and betrayal. Masters might suspect apprentices of spying, patrons might demand results with ruthless impatience, and a line between mentorship and manipulation often blurred. The pursuit of immortality became not only a technical endeavor, but a theater of human emotion, where love, envy, fear, and ambition intertwined with every experiment and every decision. Stories of success were rare, but they fueled the ambitions of others. Rumors circulated of substances that could heal disease, metals that could transform, and elixirs that granted extraordinary longevity. Some scholars claimed fleeting victories, glimpses of the philosopher's stone, or temporary effects of elixirs, though these were often unverified and shrouded in legend. Each account became a whispered incentive for others, spreading across secret networks and driving further experimentation. And yet, these victories came at a cost. For many who reached the edge of discovery paid with their health, sanity, or lives. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that forbidden experiments were the heartbeat of alchemical pursuit, a mixture of science, mysticism, and human obsession performed in shadows, with stakes that were often mortal. The audience sees a world where ambition knows no limits, where danger is omnipresent, and where the pursuit of immortality is inseparable from the risks it demands. As viewers imagine candlelit chambers, the hiss of chemicals, and scholars balancing brilliance against peril, they are left with an unsettling awareness. To pursue secrets that defy nature is to court both enlightenment and catastrophe, and some boundaries, once crossed, can never be undone. As the centuries turned and the fires of the Inquisition cooled to embers, the alchemists who survived scattered into secrecy. They no longer called themselves by that ancient name. To the world, they were philosophers, scholars, or stonemasons, men of learning and craft. But beneath their ordinary titles, they carried a lineage of wisdom that refused to die. These were the brotherhoods in the shadows, secret orders who believed that the true work of alchemy could never be abandoned, only disguised. By the 17th century, Europe's powers had changed their gods. Science had replaced faith in many hearts, and kingdoms demanded loyalty to nations instead of mystery. Yet beneath this new age of reason, old fires still glowed. In the candlelit halls of hidden lodges, small circles of men and women gathered to study the forgotten texts. They swore oaths not to kings or priests, but to truth itself. Their rituals preserved the structure of ancient alchemical initiation, symbols of purification, death, and rebirth, each act designed to mirror the transmutation of the soul. Some of these groups called themselves Rosicrucians, claiming descent from a mysterious figure named Christian Rosenkreutz, a man who, according to legend, had traveled the world learning the secrets of Egypt and Arabia before returning to Europe to found a secret brotherhood devoted to enlightenment. Whether he truly existed or not hardly mattered. The legend served as a vessel for something older, a spiritual rebellion against ignorance. To join such a brotherhood was not to gain power, but to shoulder a burden, to protect the flame of inner knowledge in an age that sought to extinguish it. Their teachings blended alchemy, mysticism, and emerging science. They believed that all knowledge, sacred or secular, pointed toward a single truth, that matter and spirit were two sides of one divine coin. In their writings, they spoke of invisible energies that flowed through the world, binding all things together. To heal the body was to heal the spirit. To understand the stars was to understand the soul. Their words echoed the ancient Hermetic motto, as above, so below. But secrecy was essential. Even in the Age of Enlightenment, those who spoke too freely about hidden forces were branded heretics or madmen. And so the brotherhoods communicated in veiled phrases, through coded letters and anonymous manifestos. One of the most famous, the Fama Fraternitatis of 1614, announced to the world the existence of the Rosicrucian order, a secret society dedicated to transforming humanity through wisdom and spiritual renewal. The text caused a sensation across Europe. Scholars, nobles, and philosophers all searched for this hidden order, sending letters into the unknown, begging for initiation. But the Brotherhood remained silent. Some believed it was a myth, others a metaphor, a mirror held up to humanity's hunger for transcendence. In truth, smaller circles did exist, scattered, cautious, and bound by loyalty to something beyond their time. In England, they met in private chambers of apothecaries and printing houses. In Germany, they gathered in forest lodges lit only by the reflection of a single golden lamp. In France, their symbols appeared carved into the architecture of cathedrals and public fountains, proof that their work continued, not in open view, but in quiet permanence. One of the most enigmatic of these groups would later evolve into what the world knows as Freemasonry. Though the Masons are often seen as builders and philosophers, their earliest rituals carried unmistakable echoes of alchemical transformation. The rough ashlar and the perfect stone symbolized the same process as the transmutation of metals, the refinement of the self through inner labor. The tools of the Mason, the compass, the square, the plumb line, were more than instruments of construction. They were emblems of cosmic order, representing the laws by which both the universe and the soul are shaped. These brotherhoods spread quietly through Europe, then across oceans to the New World. Their members were artists, scientists, poets, and reformers, people who believed that truth must evolve alongside humanity. Many of history's great innovators, from Newton to Goethe, from Benjamin Franklin to Elias Ashmole, were influenced by these esoteric traditions. They were drawn not by the promise of power, but by the dream of unity, the same dream that had driven the alchemists before them. Yet as they grew, so too did suspicion. Governments and churches feared what they could not control. Secret societies became targets of paranoia, accused of conspiracy and heresy. And while some indeed sought power or influence, others simply sought understanding. The true brotherhoods retreated deeper underground, protecting their teachings from distortion. They adopted new names, new forms, but their essence remained unchanged. Hidden behind symbols of light and geometry, they continued the great work. Their meetings began with silence, a reminder that all knowledge begins in stillness. Candles were lit to represent the soul's awakening, and the air filled with the scent of burning resins, echoes of the alchemist's furnace. Their prayers were not to gods, but to the divine intelligence within all things. They believed that if even one initiate could complete the inner transformation, it would ripple through the world like light through crystal. And so, generation after generation, the brotherhoods endured, passing their wisdom from one era to the next. During times of war, their knowledge hid in ciphers and architecture. In times of peace, it surfaced in art, poetry, and philosophy. The philosopher's stone, once sought in laboratories, became a symbol of human potential, the proof that transformation is possible, not only in matter, but in spirit. Even today, their influence lingers. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity that shaped revolutions across Europe carried within them echoes of alchemical thought. The belief that humanity could be remade, purified through fire, reborn in light. Whether in lodges, libraries, or the quiet rooms of those who still study the hidden arts, the brotherhoods remain a thread connecting the modern world to its mystical past. And so, as the centuries roll forward and empires fall to dust, their symbols still gleam faintly in stone carvings, in coins, in the designs of great capitals. A reminder that somewhere in the architecture of our world and the architecture of our souls, the work of the alchemists continues. The brotherhoods remain unseen, but their presence is everywhere, shaping the silent rhythm of history like an invisible hand. In the candlelit corners of Europe's secret laboratories, the pursuit of alchemy took on a darker hue. As the brotherhoods scattered and science began to rise in prestige, a few seekers grew restless. They no longer wished merely to understand transformation. They wanted to command it. These men, and a few daring women, pushed the boundaries between mysticism and madness. What they sought was nothing less than the mastery of life and death itself. The world called them visionaries and monsters. Among the dim corridors of 17th century Prague, a city already steeped in occult lore, experiments whispered of impossible things. The descendants of the alchemical adepts who once served Emperor Rudolph II began to move beyond metaphor. They tested theories of animation, distillation of the soul, and the transference of vital essence. Some claimed to create artificial life, homunculi, tiny beings said to be born in glass vessels from the fusion of human seed and alchemical fire. Though no proof of such creatures exists, the records left behind bear the marks of obsession. Marginal notes speak of failure, horror, and visions that drove their authors to the edge of reason. Across the Channel in England, other minds pursued their own forbidden dreams. The borders between alchemy and emerging chemistry blurred. Experimenters, inspired by the same hunger for transformation, turned their attention to the mysteries of electricity, magnetism, and the vital spark that animated living things. Could the divine flame that gives life be captured? Could death itself be reversed? These questions became the unspoken obsession of a generation standing at the threshold of modern science. One name surfaces again and again in these shadowed records: Johann Conrad Dippel, a German theologian and alchemist born at Castle Frankenstein. A brilliant but reckless mind, Dippel's experiments with animal organs and chemical compounds were said to pursue the secret of transmuting the soul itself. He believed that life could be restored if only the proper combination of substances could reawaken the vital force. His studies in anatomy, combined with his alchemical background, made him infamous even among his peers. Centuries later, his legend would inspire Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a story that captured, in Gothic form, the eternal temptation that haunted alchemy, the desire to play God. But Dippel was not alone. In secret academies and hidden workshops, others followed similar paths. Some sought to purify the blood, believing it to be the vessel of the spirit. Others pursued the elusive elixir of life, distilling potions from mercury, gold, and rare herbs. Their journals, when they survived, spoke of strange lights and visions, of voices that seemed to whisper from the substances themselves. Many died young, poisoned by fumes, driven mad by mercury, or consumed by despair. Yet even in their failures, they believed they had glimpsed something divine, a shimmer at the edge of reality, a proof that the boundary between life and death was thinner than it seemed. In France, during the 18th century, rumors spread of the Count of Saint-Germain, a mysterious man who appeared in courts across Europe without seeming to age. He claimed to have discovered the secret of immortality, spoke a dozen languages, and produced jewels of impossible quality. Some dismissed him as a charlatan. Others whispered that he was the last living alchemist, the guardian of the lost formula of the philosopher's stone. Records show he appeared in Paris, Venice, and London across decades, always identical, always enigmatic, then vanished without a trace. Even Voltaire, skeptical as he was, wrote in jest, "The Count of Saint-Germain is a man who never dies and who knows everything." Whether man, myth, or symbol, his legend became the personification of the forbidden dream of alchemy, the yearning to conquer time. As the Enlightenment deepened, alchemical pursuits were forced into darker corners. The academies and universities, once sympathetic to the alchemists' poetic ambition, turned their backs on them. Rationalism demanded clarity, not mystery. Yet, in secret laboratories, experiments continued. Some involved the mixing of human blood with metals, others the study of decay, the attempt to arrest it, to reverse the slow alchemy of death. The experiments grew grotesque. In some records, monks described visions of figures reanimated after days of lifelessness. Whether miracles or hallucinations, no one could say. These forbidden experiments were not only acts of science, but rituals, attempts to bridge the physical and spiritual worlds through willpower and devotion. They believed that through purification of the self, the experimenter could channel divine energy into matter. The failures, they said, came not from materials, but from the impurity of the operator's soul. In their journals, one reads a recurring confession: "I was not yet pure enough for the work." By the 19th century, this dangerous curiosity found new expression. The early chemists who discovered gases, isolated elements, and experimented with electricity stood unknowingly in the shadow of the old masters. When Luigi Galvani made a dead frog's leg twitch with a spark, the world gasped. Had he touched the same force the alchemists once called the anima mundi, the world's soul? When Mary Shelley wrote of Frankenstein's creation rising from lightning, she captured the collective unease of an age realizing it had inherited the forbidden dream. The laboratory had replaced the temple, but the hunger was the same. Humanity still sought the divine, secret hidden in the pulse of life. Not all who pursued these mysteries were corrupted by ambition. Some saw their experiments as acts of compassion, a desperate wish to heal, to restore what was lost. There are records of healers who used alchemical tinctures to cure the incurable, who mixed metals and herbs in ways that defied understanding. Their elixirs, often dismissed by later medicine, sometimes worked. Whether by chemistry or faith, they seemed to awaken something within the body itself. Perhaps they had not created life, but reminded it how to live. Still, for every miracle, there was a price. Mercury claimed many minds. Gold fever consumed many fortunes, and obsession destroyed countless hearts. The line between revelation and ruin grew impossibly thin. The forbidden experiments revealed not only the limits of nature, but the fragility of the human spirit. For every alchemist who dreamed of bringing light into darkness, there was another who became lost in that same darkness, believing he could command creation, forgetting that true transformation begins with surrender, not control. As the world moved into the modern age, the laboratories of the forbidden slowly disappeared, replaced by institutions and ethics, laws and laboratories lit by fluorescent light instead of candle flame. But their ghost remains. In every scientific experiment that pushes the boundary of life, in cloning, in artificial intelligence, in the study of consciousness, the echo of the forbidden experiment returns. The instruments have changed, the names have changed, but the question remains the same, whispered through the centuries like a spell. What does it mean to create life? And what must be sacrificed to do so? As centuries turned, the dream of the philosopher's stone did not fade. It evolved. What once shimmered as a mythical object of gold and immortality began to take on a deeper, subtler meaning. The alchemists of the past had spoken of transmuting lead into gold, but their truest pursuit was never merely metal. It was transformation itself, the elevation of the impure into the pure, the imperfect into the divine. In every age, new seekers reinterpreted this dream in the language of their own time, breathing new life into an idea that refused to die. By the late 19th century, science had replaced superstition, yet the hunger for the eternal persisted. Laboratories no longer smelled of incense and mercury, but of ozone, steel, and fire. Men who studied matter on a molecular level began to glimpse the same mysteries their alchemical forebears had pursued through symbol and prayer. In the hidden lattice of atoms, they found a vision of the universe that echoed the ancient belief that all things are one substance, endlessly transformed. The stone, they realized, might not be a physical object at all, but a principle woven into the fabric of existence. In quiet corners of Europe, a few scholars refused to let the old wisdom die. They read the cryptic manuscripts of the alchemists not as superstition, but as metaphor. Jungian psychologists saw in them the map of the human soul. The stone, they argued, represented wholeness, the moment when the fragmented self becomes unified. Gold was never just gold. It was enlightenment, completion, the full realization of one's inner potential. In this light, the work of the alchemist mirrored the work of the mind itself, to turn the base metal of confusion, fear, and desire into the shining gold of awareness. Carl Jung himself, the Swiss psychiatrist and mystic of the early 20th century, dedicated years to studying alchemical texts. He saw in their strange imagery, the sun and moon, the serpent devouring its tail, the marriage of opposites, a hidden psychology. To him, the alchemist's furnace was a symbol of the human psyche under transformation, the crucible where shadow and light merge into balance. The philosopher's stone was not found in flasks or metals, but in the process of individuation, the sacred journey toward becoming whole. It was the same quest that had driven sages, mystics, and seekers since time immemorial. Yet the idea also found new life in the physical sciences. In laboratories studying radioactivity and nuclear transmutation, the old dream suddenly seemed almost real. For the first time in history, scientists could change one element into another. The medieval vision of turning lead into gold was no longer entirely impossible. It could be done, though at great cost and with no profit. Still, the symbolism was undeniable. Humanity had learned the secret of elemental change, but not yet the wisdom to use it. The alchemists had warned that transformation without purity of heart would lead only to ruin. The 20th century, with its wars and weapons of fire, proved how prophetic that warning had been. As bombs fell and cities burned, the stone seemed farther away than ever. Yet, even amid destruction, the idea of inner transformation persisted. In post-war Europe, artists and poets began to rediscover alchemical imagery as a metaphor for rebirth. The soot-covered cities, rising from ashes into new light, mirrored the alchemical process of calcination and purification. Humanity itself was in the furnace, being remade. The stone, once sought in secret laboratories, now lived in collective dreams of peace and renewal. Meanwhile, in hidden spiritual circles, the stone took on yet another form. Mystics and esoteric teachers described it as a vibration, a state of consciousness beyond duality. They spoke of inner gold, not a metal, but a light that awakens when the self is aligned with the rhythm of the universe. Meditation, breath, and stillness became the new alchemy. The laboratory turned inward. The furnace became the human heart. And the transformation was no longer of elements, but of awareness itself. Modern seekers began to draw connections between the alchemical stone and the discoveries of quantum physics. The idea that consciousness influences matter, that observation itself changes reality, felt strangely similar to the old alchemical belief that the mind and the world are mirrors. In the subatomic dance of particles, some saw the echo of ancient truths, that creation is not fixed, but fluid, and that transformation is not merely chemical, but cosmic. The stone, in this sense, might be the point of unity between mind and matter, the place where the dreamer and the dream become one. As the world entered the digital age, the old symbols found new meanings yet again. The quest for the philosopher's stone mirrored humanity's growing fascination with technology, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering. In labs across the planet, scientists began experimenting with the very code of life, editing genes, crafting new forms of consciousness. The dream of perfection, once wrapped in mystical allegory, had become a matter of code and computation. Yet beneath the glowing screens and humming machines, the same questions lingered. What does it mean to perfect creation? Can we achieve immortality without losing our humanity? Can a stone be forged in silicon instead of spirit? Some thinkers argued that the modern stone is not a thing to be held, but a way of being, a recognition that transformation must include compassion, not just knowledge. The alchemists had always insisted that the great work was both a scientific and moral act. Without inner purification, outer mastery would turn to chaos. In this sense, the philosopher's stone is the moment when wisdom and power unite, when a human heart becomes as refined as the gold it once sought to create. It is the fusion of science and soul. In quiet rooms lit by blue computer light, today's dreamers still chase the same fire. Whether in the study of consciousness, longevity, or synthetic life, they continue the work. And though they may not call it alchemy, their pursuit carries the same hope that there is a hidden order in the chaos of existence, a code that can heal, enlighten, and transform. The stone is not a relic of the past, but a symbol reborn with every generation that dares to imagine more. As night falls on this long history, one truth glows softly at its center. The philosopher's stone was never about gold or glory. It was about awakening. It was about seeing the divine pattern in all things and recognizing that transformation begins not in the furnace, but in the heart. The stone, reimagined, is not something to find. It is something to become. In every act of understanding, every moment of compassion, every spark of creativity, it shines. The great work never ended. It simply changed its form. And somewhere, in the stillness between breath and thought, it waits, eternal, unbroken, and quietly alive. Long after the last true alchemist had vanished from their smoky chambers, whispers of their legacy persisted. Across Europe, stories circulated about a hidden lineage, men and women known as the hidden masters. They were said to be the keepers of an unbroken chain of wisdom, protectors of knowledge too powerful for common eyes. To the world, they were myth. To those who sought them, they were the invisible architects of enlightenment. Whether they were hermits in mountain monasteries or disguised scholars in the heart of modern cities, their presence was always suggested, never confirmed, like the faint outline of a constellation half buried in cloud. The idea of the hidden masters first appeared in the secret societies of the 17th and 18th centuries. Among the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and Theosophists, there ran a belief that a small circle of enlightened beings watched over humanity's progress. They were said to guide thinkers, artists, and scientists through intuition and inspiration, whispering new ideas into the minds of dreamers. Newton, Goethe, even Da Vinci were rumored to have felt their touch. They were not gods, but guardians, alchemists who had succeeded in transmuting not metal, but their own consciousness. Through them, the great work continued in silence. This belief found new voice in the 19th century when mystics like Helena Blavatsky and her followers in the Theosophical Society claimed to receive teachings from ascended masters. These beings, she wrote, dwelled in remote sanctuaries in Tibet, Egypt, and the high plateaus of the world, preserving the last fragments of ancient wisdom. Their knowledge was not merely about alchemy or science, but the structure of existence itself. They understood that all matter, all life, was vibration and light, and that through spiritual refinement, a human being could ascend beyond the limits of mortality. Blavatsky's tales of these masters electrified the West, blending ancient mysticism with a modern hunger for transcendence. Skeptics dismissed them as fantasies, yet the allure of the hidden masters grew. Artists and philosophers who encountered this idea found in it something profoundly symbolic. The notion that wisdom itself is eternal, passed quietly from age to age through those ready to receive it. The masters were less people and more archetypes, the embodiment of humanity's highest potential. They symbolized the perfected state that every alchemist sought, a reminder that enlightenment was not found in isolation, but inherited through invisible mentorship from those who came before. Throughout the 20th century, whispers of the hidden masters continued to surface in unexpected places. During wartime, strange stories emerged of scientists who made impossible breakthroughs after moments of mysterious insight, claiming to have seen the solution in a dream or a flash of intuition. In literature, figures resembling the hidden masters appeared under countless disguises: the wise old hermit, the unnamed teacher, the luminous stranger who appears when the student is ready. In every story, they shared a single purpose: to awaken what is dormant within humanity, to remind us that the true transformation begins within. Some believe the hidden masters are not individuals at all, but a collective consciousness, an ancient field of wisdom that humanity can tune into. When a mind reaches a certain clarity, it touches that current, and the wisdom flows as if from another source. In this sense, the masters are not out there, but within us, reflected in every act of creativity, courage, and compassion. The alchemists hinted at this truth when they wrote that the stone lies hidden in the heart of the wise. The masters, too, may dwell in the same invisible place, accessible only through the alchemy of the soul. But others insist the legacy is more literal. Legends tell of secret archives, buried beneath old cathedrals or hidden within forgotten libraries, where the complete teachings of alchemy remain intact. According to some accounts, the last true alchemists encoded their discoveries in plain sight, disguising them within works of art, architecture, and even music. Gothic cathedrals, with their golden ratios and soaring arches, were said to be stone grimoires, resonating with the geometry of the divine. The masters in this interpretation are the unseen designers who left behind a silent blueprint of enlightenment carved into the very bones of civilization. In the 20th century, with the rise of the occult revival, new orders claimed to work under the guidance of the hidden masters. Some saw them as entities from another realm, beings of light, older than humanity itself. Others regarded them as the last remnants of a secret lineage stretching back to Egypt, Atlantis, or the stars. Whether mythical or real, their influence gave birth to entire movements of thought, spiritual, scientific, and artistic, that reshaped how people saw the connection between matter and spirit. From the surrealists to the early physicists who glimpsed the strange dance of quantum reality, the same undercurrent pulsed, the idea that behind visible reality, something ancient watches and guides. The emotional core of this belief lies in its comfort and its challenge. To believe in the hidden masters is to believe that humanity is not alone in its search for light, that there are guardians of wisdom who never abandoned us, who quietly protect the flame of transformation through every dark age. But it also carries a mirror. What if the masters are waiting for us not to follow, but to become them? What if every generation is meant to carry the torch further, to embody the same awareness that once seemed divine? The line between student and master, between seeker and sage, begins to blur. As night deepens across this long journey, the image of the hidden masters lingers, a silent circle gathered in an invisible chamber, their faces serene, their eyes reflecting the light of countless stars. They are the keepers of the great work, the unseen architects of humanity's evolution. And perhaps, somewhere in the quiet hum of thought and memory, their presence still moves, guiding artists, scientists, and dreamers toward discoveries that echo the alchemist's promise of unity and transformation. The legacy of the hidden masters is not a myth to be proven, but a mystery to be lived. It is the whisper behind every breakthrough, the stillness behind every act of creation, the reminder that wisdom does not die. It changes form as gold once did in the crucible. And for those who listen closely, that whisper continues, as soft as a heartbeat and as vast as eternity. The work is never finished. The age of laboratories lit by candlelight has faded, but the great work, the eternal quest for transformation, endures. Its form has changed, yet its purpose remains the same: to understand, to evolve, to bridge the visible and the invisible. The tools are no longer alembics and furnaces, but satellites, particle accelerators, and computer codes. The alchemists once dreamed of transmuting matter. Today, humanity seeks to transmute itself. The world of the 21st century hums with the same feverish longing that once burned in the hearts of the old philosophers, an unspoken desire to pierce the veil between the mortal and the divine. In sleek laboratories and glass towers, modern scientists continue the work without ever naming it as such. Genetic engineers manipulate the code of life, unraveling the mystery of what makes us mortal. Biochemists pursue the reversal of aging, the repair of damaged cells, and the extension of consciousness beyond the body. Artificial intelligence researchers attempt to recreate thought itself, building machines that mirror the complexity of the human mind. And in all of this, though the words are different, the motive feels familiar: the pursuit of perfection, the longing for mastery over death and decay. The dream of immortality has not died. It has simply changed its language. Some call this progress, others call it hubris. To the old alchemists, true transformation required purity of intention and balance between soul and science. They warned that power without wisdom would lead to destruction, that those who sought gold without enlightenment would find only ruin. Yet the modern world often forgets this. In its haste to conquer nature, it risks repeating the ancient mistake, mistaking knowledge for wisdom. The great work was never about control. It was about harmony. The alchemists did not wish to dominate nature, but to understand it, to reflect its divine intelligence within themselves. Today's technologies, for all their brilliance, often struggle to remember that distinction. Still, in quiet corners of the modern world, there are echoes of the old alchemical spirit. In the fields of depth psychology, philosophy, and quantum science, thinkers once again speak of unity, of consciousness and matter as two expressions of one reality. The human mind, they say, is not a machine but a participant in the universe, shaping what it observes. It is the same revelation that alchemists intuited centuries ago, that the observer and the observed are inseparable, that creation is a mirror reflecting itself endlessly. When modern scientists describe the entanglement of particles across light years, one can almost hear the whisper of Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below, as within, so without. The great work has also moved inward. Where the old masters purified metals, the new seekers purify perception. Through meditation, mindfulness, and psychological exploration, they attempt to refine the base elements of the self, fear, greed, anger, into compassion, clarity, and insight. The modern crucible is not made of glass and flame, but of awareness itself. Each act of understanding, each moment of forgiveness becomes a transmutation. In this way, the alchemical legacy has seeped quietly into every realm of human endeavor, from art and therapy to environmentalism and ethics. The call to transformation is universal, timeless, and deeply human. The environmental crises of the modern era have also brought a strange reflection of alchemy's old wisdom. As the planet trembles under the weight of human ambition, many have begun to remember that transformation cannot come through extraction and domination, but through balance. Ancient alchemists saw the world as alive, a being with spirit, breath, and will. They spoke of metals as growing, evolving things, and of Earth as a vast organism. Modern science, through ecology and systems theory, is slowly rediscovering that truth. The world is not a collection of separate parts, but a single, interconnected whole. Humanity's survival may depend on learning once again what the alchemists always knew, that creation and destruction are two sides of the same eternal process. In art and literature, the spirit of the great work continues to inspire. Writers and filmmakers, knowingly or not, retell the alchemical story in modern form. Every tale of transformation, every hero's journey from darkness to light, mirrors the old process of purification and rebirth. Even the language of technology borrows alchemy's metaphors: transmutation, fusion, singularity. The dream of turning base material into gold has become the dream of turning chaos into meaning, data into consciousness, life into something luminous and enduring. The outer tools may have changed, but the inner longing remains the same. And so, the question arises, has humanity completed the great work, or is it still unfolding? In truth, the work is eternal. It is the motion of the universe itself, the constant striving toward higher order, towards self-awareness. The alchemist said that the stone was both the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega. Modern science now glimpses something similar in the dance of creation and entropy, in the endless birth and death of stars. Everywhere, transformation reigns. The same fire that once glowed in an alchemist's furnace now burns at the heart of suns, in the circuitry of computers, and in the human soul's relentless search for meaning. Emotionally, the modern work is both exhilarating and haunting. We live in a time of miracles and dangers, where the secrets once sought in whispers are being realized on a global scale. The power to reshape life itself lies in our hands. But as the old masters warned, the greatest danger is not ignorance, it is pride. The stone grants immortality only to those who have already died to their selfishness. Without that death, the gift becomes a curse. In this way, the alchemical journey remains a mirror held up to humanity, asking the same timeless question: are we ready for what we seek? In the quiet of night, surrounded by glowing screens and digital stars, the great work continues. Every invention, Every discovery, every act of love or creation is part of it. The universe itself is the laboratory, and consciousness the experiment. Whether we realize it or not, each of us is an alchemist, transforming experience into understanding and darkness into light. The outer world reflects the inner, and every soul carries within it the spark of the stone, waiting to awaken. And so, even in the age of technology, the spirit of the alchemists lives on, not in the gold of matter, but in the gold of awareness. The great work is not something left behind in dusty manuscripts. It breathes in every heartbeat that dares to imagine something higher. Perhaps that is the true immortality they sought. Not endless life, but endless awakening. For as long as humanity continues to dream of transformation, the alchemist's fire will never go out. It will only change its flame. Around the flickering fires of the prehistoric night, when the stars hung low and the world felt still, a quiet exchange of wisdom flowed among the people. It was not written in symbols or carried in parchment, but passed through gestures, glances, and murmured words that carried meaning deeper than speech itself. The old ones, with faces carved by time and experience, shared lessons learned from countless seasons of survival. They showed the young how to read the land, how to track animals through faint impressions in the soil, and how to sense the coming of rain by the tremble of the wind. Their stories were not told for entertainment, but as vessels of survival, each tale carrying a map, a warning, or a secret of endurance. Children watched the elders' hands as they shaped tools from stone, memorizing every motion until it became second nature. A chipped edge was more than craftsmanship. It was the line between life and hunger. The young listened, not to words but to rhythm. The steady, patient tap of flint striking flint, the soft murmur of satisfaction when a perfect blade appeared. Each person who recognizes the light contributes to the continuity of the eternal fire. The ultimate revelation of the flame is that it binds past, present, and future. In every experiment, every reflection, every act of courage and creation, the knowledge of centuries lives on. The work of those who pursued immortality, whether through metals, words, or symbols, was never in vain. Their greatest gift was not gold or life everlasting, but the example of their pursuit, a demonstration that humanity is capable of reaching beyond the mundane toward the extraordinary. And in that striving, the eternal flame shines. At the end of this journey through hidden laboratories, secret orders, and the restless pursuit of transformation, one truth crystallizes. The flame of the alchemists is both within and beyond us. It is the light of curiosity, the fire of moral courage, and the quiet brilliance of insight. It reminds us that even in a world of fleeting time and shifting shadows, there exists something eternal, a current of knowledge and wisdom that flows quietly through human history, waiting for those who will recognize it. And so, the great work continues in laboratories, in libraries, in quiet contemplation, and in the hearts of those who dare to dream beyond the surface of reality. The eternal flame is not a treasure to be hoarded, nor a secret to be feared. It is a living truth that can illuminate life itself. To follow it is to participate in a lineage that stretches across centuries, connecting every human heart to the hidden pulse of the cosmos. As the screen fades to black, one thought lingers, a whisper through time. What if the true secret of alchemy was never in the metals, the stones, or the potions, but in the unbroken spark of transformation that resides within us all? Perhaps the greatest alchemists were not the men in their hidden chambers, but every human who dares to look inward, to cultivate wisdom, and to carry the flame into the unknown future. The eternal flame endures, silent yet radiant, a testament to the hidden quest of the alchemists, a reminder that the great work is never finished, and that within every one of us burns the possibility of transmutation, enlightenment, and timeless understanding. These were lessons born of necessity, passed not through commands, but through the silent patience of observation. At night, when silence settled upon the village, knowledge continued to move. Shadows of the fire danced across faces, and in those shifting lights, generations found connection. The elders whispered of the great beasts that once roamed the plains and the places where rivers changed their paths. They spoke of the stars, not as distant suns, but as living guides that pointed the way home. Every story layered itself upon the next, building an invisible web of shared understanding that bound the tribe together stronger than any shelter could. In this silence, every action became a word, and every word became a memory. The exchange of knowledge was a sacred rhythm, an unbroken chain that linked the past to the future. Through it, the people found not just survival, but meaning, a sense that even in a world so vast and wild, their wisdom was a fire that would never fade, as long as it was shared around the flickering fires of the prehistoric night. When the stars hung low and the world felt still, a quiet exchange of wisdom flowed among the people. It was not written in symbols or carried in parchment, but passed through gestures, glances, and murmured words that carried meaning deeper than speech itself. The old ones, with faces carved by time and experience, shared lessons learned from countless seasons of survival. They showed the young how to read the land, how to track animals through faint impressions in the soil, and how to sense the coming of rain by the tremble of the wind. Their stories were not told for entertainment, but as vessels of survival, each tale carrying a map, a warning, or a secret of endurance. Children watched the elders' hands as they shaped tools from stone, memorizing every motion until it became second nature. A chipped edge was more than craftsmanship. It was the line between life and hunger. The young listened, not to words but to rhythm, the steady, patient tap of flint striking flint, the soft murmur of satisfaction when a perfect blade appeared. These were lessons born of necessity, passed not through commands, but through the silent patience of observation. At night, when silence settled upon the village, knowledge continued to move. Shadows of the fire danced across faces, and in those shifting lights, generations found connection. The elders whispered of the great beasts that once roamed the plains and the places where rivers changed their paths. They spoke of the stars, not as distant suns, but as living guides that pointed the way home. Every story layered itself upon the next, building an invisible web of shared understanding that bound the tribe together stronger than any shelter could. In this silence, every action became a word, and every word became a memory. The exchange of knowledge was a sacred rhythm, an unbroken chain that linked the past to the future. Through it, the people found not just survival, but meaning, a sense that even in a world so vast and wild, their wisdom was a fire that would never fade as long as it was shared. As the moons passed and the earth turned beneath their feet, the people came to know the language of the seasons. Each shift in wind, each pattern in the clouds, spoke to them in tones that only patience could interpret. Spring brought a gentle stirring of life, the melting snow feeding streams that once ran dry, and with it, the promise of renewal. The tribe would move closer to the rivers then, their camps filled with laughter and the rhythm of preparation. Women gathered tender shoots from the waking ground, while hunters followed the paths of returning herds, guided by instincts sharpened through countless migrations. Summer arrived not as a surprise, but as a visitor long expected. The air thickened with warmth and sound. Insects hummed like hidden drums, and the forest shimmered in green abundance. Yet, with plenty came vigilance. The people knew that abundance never lasted. Fires were built to dry meat, and fruits were stored in woven baskets, sealed with clay. Even the children joined in the work, learning that survival was not found in the strength of one, but in the unity of all. The village pulsed with energy, every heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the living world. Then came autumn, the season of reflection and restraint. Leaves turned from vibrant green to hues of gold and rust, a reminder that beauty and decay often walked hand in hand. The elders would speak of the cycle, how the earth gives and takes in equal measure, and how only those who respect that balance endure. Nights grew longer, and the songs sung by the fire deepened in tone, carrying gratitude for what had been gathered and quiet courage for what lay ahead. Winter followed as a test of faith and endurance. The cold did not ask permission. It simply arrived, sweeping across the plains with merciless precision. The people huddled close, fires burning low, stories keeping the chill at bay. It was in these months of scarcity that they learned the true measure of their resilience. Every ember, every shared breath, was a testament to the tribe's harmony with the earth's rhythm. The seasons were not enemies nor allies. They were teachers, and in their eternal cycle, as the moons passed and the earth turned beneath their feet, the people came to know the language of the seasons. Each shift in wind, each pattern in the clouds, spoke to them in tones that only patience could interpret. Spring brought a gentle stirring of life, the melting snow feeding streams that once ran dry, and with it, the promise of renewal. The tribe would move closer to the rivers then, their camps filled with laughter and the rhythm of preparation. Women gathered tender shoots from the waking ground, while hunters followed the paths of returning herds, guided by instincts sharpened through countless migrations. Summer arrived not as a surprise, but as a visitor long expected. The air thickened with warmth and sound. Insects hummed like hidden drums, and the forest shimmered in green abundance. Yet, with plenty came vigilance. The people knew that abundance never lasted. Fires were built to dry meat, and fruits were stored in woven baskets, sealed with clay. Even the children joined in the work, learning that survival was not found in the strength of one, but in the unity of all. The village pulsed with energy, every heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the living world. Then came autumn, the season of reflection and restraint. Leaves turned from vibrant green to hues of gold and rust, a reminder that beauty and decay often walked hand in hand. The elders would speak of the cycle, how the earth gives and takes in equal measure, and how only those who respect that balance endure. Nights grew longer, and the songs sung by the fire deepened in tone, carrying gratitude for what had been gathered and quiet courage for what lay ahead. Winter followed as a test of faith and endurance. The cold did not ask permission. It simply arrived, sweeping across the plains with merciless precision. The people huddled close, fires burning low, stories keeping the chill at bay. It was in these months of scarcity that they learned the true measure of their resilience. Every ember, every shared breath, was a testament to the tribe's harmony with the earth's rhythm. The seasons were not enemies nor allies. They were teachers, and in their eternal cycle, humanity found its greatest wisdom. Humanity, foe as the moons passed and the earth turned beneath their feet, the people came to know the language of the seasons. Each shift in wind, each pattern in the clouds, spoke to them in tones that only patience could interpret. Spring brought a gentle stirring of life, the melting snow feeding streams that once ran dry, and with it, the promise of renewal. The tribe would move closer to the rivers then, their camps filled with laughter and the rhythm of preparation. Women gathered tender shoots from the waking ground, while hunters followed the paths of returning herds, guided by instincts sharpened through countless migrations. Summer arrived not as a surprise, but as a visitor long expected. The air thickened with warmth and sound. Insects hummed like hidden drums, and the forest shimmered in green abundance. Yet, with plenty came vigilance. The people knew that abundance never lasted. Fires were built to dry meat, and fruits were stored in woven baskets sealed with clay. Even the children joined in the work, learning that survival was not found in the strength of one, but in the unity of all. The village pulsed with energy, every heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the living world. Then came autumn, the season of reflection and restraint. Leaves turned from vibrant green to hues of gold and rust, a reminder that beauty and decay often walked hand in hand. The elders would speak of the cycle, how the earth gives and takes in equal measure, and how only those who respect that balance endure. Nights grew longer, and the songs sung by the fire deepened in tone, carrying gratitude for what had been gathered and quiet courage for what lay ahead. Winter followed as a test of faith and endurance. The cold did not ask permission. It simply arrived, sweeping across the plains with merciless precision. The people huddled close, fires burning low, stories keeping the chill at bay. It was in these months of scarcity that they learned the true measure of their resilience. Every ember, every shared breath, was a testament to the tribe's harmony with the earth's rhythm. The seasons were not enemies nor allies. They were teachers, and in their eternal cycle, humanity found its greatest wisdom. Its greatest wisdom. At the edge of history, where time seems to fold in upon itself, the alchemist's story finds its final spark. The eternal flame they sought was never merely a chemical reaction, nor a metal turned to gold. It was a light within the human spirit, a fire of understanding, transformation, and hope. Across the centuries, through smoke-filled laboratories, secret brotherhoods, and hidden manuscripts, one truth emerges clearly. The philosopher's stone, the homunculus, the elixirs of life, all were metaphors, symbols pointing to the ultimate quest of humanity, the alchemy of the soul. Even as kingdoms rose and fell, as empires conquered and collapsed, the flame persisted. It flickered in hidden chambers where the Rosicrucians gathered, glimmered in the hand-carved symbols of Freemasons, and pulsed through the quiet reflections of mystics and visionaries. Those who came close to grasping it understood that true transformation could not be forced. It could only be cultivated, like a fire tended with patience, insight, and humility. The great masters of old knew that the same force that animates life also demands respect, wisdom, and moral clarity. Attempting to seize it recklessly would yield not mastery, but destruction. Through the centuries, humanity has pursued this flame in many forms. The alchemists distilled metals and minerals. Scientists deciphered the building blocks of matter. Philosophers and poets sought the secret of consciousness itself. Each discipline is a facet of the same quest, to find the hidden order within chaos, the golden thread that connects mortal life to eternity. In every act of creation, every discovery, and every reflection on the nature of existence, the echoes of the alchemist's great work remain, whispering that transformation is not something to be taken lightly. The eternal flame is also deeply human. It represents our capacity to learn from history, to weave knowledge into wisdom, and to transform fear and ignorance into courage and understanding. When a scientist peers into a microscope, seeing worlds within cells, or a philosopher contemplates the nature of consciousness, or a child watches a candle flicker in awe, they touch the same spark. It is not confined to laboratories or sacred chambers. It resides wherever curiosity, devotion, and love of truth flourish. It is the invisible inheritance of the ages, waiting for each generation to recognize its power. The secret of the flame is subtle. It cannot be bought, coerced, or commanded. It grows only when nurtured through reflection, discipline, and empathy. The alchemist's writings, so dense with symbols and paradoxes, often hid the simplest truth. The transformation of the self is the first step toward transforming the world. Lead becomes gold, not through chemical trickery, but through the refining of character, perception, and intention. In this sense, the flame is not distant. It burns in every act of moral courage, every spark of insight, and every moment in which humans choose understanding over ignorance, compassion over cruelty. Even in modern times, the eternal flame continues to inspire. From breakthroughs in medicine to advances in physics, from the creative imagination of artists to the quiet wisdom of spiritual seekers, the same pursuit hums beneath the surface. Humanity is still engaged in the alchemical work of transforming base impulses into enlightened action. Technology may give new forms, and science may illuminate new paths, but the essential challenge remains unchanged: to harmonize knowledge with virtue, insight with empathy, and power with responsibility. There is also a profound mystery intertwined with the flame. Its transmission is subtle and often invisible. Like the ancient brotherhoods passing their wisdom through secret teachings, inspiration often comes silently, through encounters, observations, or fleeting moments of clarity. A teacher's words, a book discovered by chance, a solitary night spent in contemplation. These are the sparks that keep the flame alive across generations. The alchemists understood that the great work is not merely personal, it is communal. Each person who recognizes the light contributes to the continuity of the eternal fire. The ultimate revelation of the flame is that it binds past, present, and future. In every experiment, every reflection, every act of courage and creation, the knowledge of centuries lives on. The work of those who pursued immortality, whether through metals, words, or symbols, was never in vain. Their greatest gift was not gold or life everlasting, but the example of their pursuit, a demonstration that humanity is capable of reaching beyond the mundane toward the extraordinary. And in that striving, the eternal flame shines. At the end of this journey through hidden laboratories, secret orders, and the restless pursuit of transformation, one truth crystallizes: the flame of the alchemist is both within and beyond us. It is the light of curiosity, the fire of moral courage, and the quiet brilliance of insight. It reminds us that even in a world of fleeting time and shifting shadows, there exists something eternal, a current of knowledge and wisdom that flows quietly through human history, waiting for those who will recognize it. And so, the great work continues in laboratories, in libraries, in quiet contemplation, and in the hearts of those who dare to dream beyond the surface of reality. The eternal flame is not a treasure to be hoarded, nor a secret to be feared. It is a living truth that can illuminate life itself. To follow, it is to participate in a lineage that stretches across centuries, connecting every human heart to the hidden pulse of the cosmos. As the screen fades to black, one thought lingers, a whisper through time. What if the true secret of alchemy was never in the metals, the stones, or the potions, but in the unbroken spark of transformation that resides within us all? Perhaps the greatest alchemists were not the men in their hidden chambers, but every human who dares to look inward, to cultivate wisdom, and to carry the flame into the unknown future. The eternal flame endures, silent yet radiant, a testament to the hidden quest of the alchemists, a reminder that the great work is never finished, and that within every one of us burns the possibility of transmutation, enlightenment, and timeless understanding.